You're one of the 7 commissioned officers on the LVMPD SAR team.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the M?
So it's Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Yeah.
Gotcha. Walk me through what that actually means. Like, what's your role and how's the team structured?
Yeah, totally. So the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, what a lot of people don't realize is it's actually the sheriff's department for Clark County. So instead of it being like like LAPD where it's, got a police chief and stuff like that, we actually work for an elected official, a sheriff. So we cover all of Clark County. So that encompasses things like, the Mount Charleston area, the Spring Mountains, Red Rock, all that kind of stuff too, not just the city of Las Vegas. So everything from like Laughlin down to the south, all the way up to like Mesquite in the north, Mount Charleston, all of those different areas are literally covered by our agency. So we're like, I think one of the top 10 largest agencies in the country as far as police agencies go. The search and rescue team is a very small team within that, right? So we have 7 full-time police officers that are assigned to the team. And then we have a sergeant who's he's also a team member. He's a SAR officer as well. Like he's capable of doing all the things that the other officers are, but he kind of has that managerial role a lot too, but he still goes out on rescues and everything too. So it's the 8 of us that comprise the full-time team. And then we have 40 or so volunteers that kind of help fill all the different specialty, like niche teams that we have. So within search and rescue, we break it down into basically like 4 different groups. We have our lead climb team, our mountain rescue team, our dive search and recovery team, and then we have TEMS, which is tactical emergency medical support. So we're basically the medics for the SWAT team. So out of all those things, the TEMS is what keeps us probably the busiest because our SWAT team is a full-time team here as well. They're very, very busy team. So we're assisting them with like warrants and barricades and hostage rescues like on a pretty much daily basis. So the 8 of us are kind of split between handling any calls that come in, whether it's, a call to go support SWAT, it's a call to go find evidence or, help somebody out at Lake Mead in the water, things like that. And then obviously we have, all the mountains around here where we have mountain rescue, which is probably our second thing that keeps us the busiest. And that is usually like encompassing like hurt hikers, lost people out in the desert, lost people in the mountains. That's what we would consider mountain rescue. Sometimes it does have vertical access type things where, ropes and stuff are involved. If we get hikers get ledged out quite a bit. They're not necessarily climbers, but they wandered or scrambled into places they shouldn't be, out in particularly Red Rock and then in the summertime Mount Charleston, to where they found themselves, crap, I need assistance now. I can't get down from here or I might die. Then we can go in there and kind of access them with ropes and lower them out and stuff like that. And then obviously the big one for like this podcast would be our lead climb team. And then that's specifically what it sounds like. That's so that we can go in and climb up and access people that are stuck on all the, world-class climbing routes that are here in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So.
I'm going to have you tilt your hat back just a little bit more.
Oh, cool. I can actually take it off too if you want.
It'll be inconsistent that way.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't want your eyes to get shaded.
How am I now?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll try to keep good posture too.
So for all of those different skill sets and the diversification of like your team, it sounds like you're still all required to have those skills. It's not like you have like, okay, these 2 people are this part of this team, these 2 people like specialize. It's like everybody's doing everything.
Yeah, true. So all of the officers are specifically, we have to know everything, right? We have to be proficient in all of those 4 main things. All of us are medics. We all have to have at least an advanced EMT certification or better. We do have paramedics and stuff on the team as well. We all have to be proficient in all the ropes. The lead climb is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Not all of us are per se like, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like avid climbers. Everybody climbs. Everybody's familiar with the climbing systems. Everybody knows how to place pro. But there's 2 of us that are actual avid climbers. And then I would say that the other 6 are proficient in it, but can also access via like fixed lines, almost taking on like big wall techniques. So that's where, especially with our lead climb team, our volunteers. So our volunteers are very specific to teams. Our lead climb team, we have about 10 volunteers that are literally world-class climbers. We've got, some of those guys are 514 climbers. There's guys on the team that are, level 3, like SPRAT and IRATA, like rope access guys. Just world-class individuals. So when we do have to access somebody that is in a very challenging location, we do have the resources to do so if we're not able to access them via helicopter. which is a whole nother thing because we use the helicopter in pretty much every rescue that we can, especially the ones that are very life threatening, just for access issues. So yeah, so the volunteers are I mean, we couldn't do it without them for sure, right? But yeah, as far as your question, all of us are very proficient in all of the different teams that we have and all the different skill sets that we need to have for it. So that's why it's a hard unit to get to. And you do have to have a lot of certifications before you can even test and be eligible to come to the team. So it's a very challenging position to get on the department for sure.
Yeah. So talk to me about your progression into the role that you have now. What's your history? Like, how have you acquired the skill sets to be where you are right now?
So that story goes back a long time, actually. So I mean, as far as the climbing is concerned, like I was saying earlier, I started climbing in the 90s. So like 30 plus years of climbing. So that's just always been kind of like a big passion of mine. Early on, my dad was a police officer. So, I mean, I knew from probably when I was a teenager that I wanted to be a police officer someday. So, I was born and raised in Montana. Right out of high school, I went into the military. And while I was in the military, I used to come out to Red Rock all the time to go climbing. Like, I was just like, this place is amazing. And as I was getting towards the end of that career, I decided, you know what, Las Vegas would be a cool place to be a police officer. So climbing was like my catalyst for moving here and choosing this place. And then it was almost like the job was kind of secondary at first. And then I moved here, got hired on with the police department back in January of 2006, a little over 20 years ago. And been here ever since. So to be a part of our search and rescue team, you have to be, as of now, like current today, you have to be a police officer for at least 2 years. Back then, I think you had to have about like 5 years on. So they've changed like
Do you have to be a police officer in Las Vegas for 2 years?
With our agency, correct. Yeah, you have to be a police officer with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department for at least 2 years. Once you've satisfied that, as long as you have certain medical certifications and dive certifications and a few other things, you're eligible to test for the position. So specifically to me, I started out my career like everybody else, as a police officer in a black and white patrol car handling calls. I primarily worked the southwest part of town, and I also spent a short time in like the northeast part of town working patrol. And then early on, I actually got the opportunity to go to our firearms range and teach all the new academies and stuff how to shoot. It was just something from the military that I was pretty good at. And I enjoyed teaching and stuff too. So I left patrol. And while I was there, I met an officer named Dave Van Buskirk. He was also a firearms instructor, and he was actually one of the full-time members of our search and rescue team. And I didn't know a whole lot about it. I started talking with Dave. Dave found out I was a climber, and Dave kind of became my mentor with another guy named Jason that was Dave's partner. Jason has since retired. So those two kind of started chatting me up, and I started coming along and helping them almost as what we call like a role player. I would come out with some local climbers, and that were some of those volunteers I was talking about earlier, and we would go climb up on a route and pretend to get stuck or injured, and then they would have to come rescue us, get us off the wall and fly us out. So then I became eligible to test while I was working at the firearms range back in the day, and it didn't work out. First of all, they didn't have any openings. Once people get to this team, they generally don't leave. Very rarely people will promote or retire is what usually. For example, the position, the reason I'm here now is because somebody retired and I was able to take their spot. But that's much later. But yeah, so Dave and Jason kind of talked me into it. I tested, but I honestly quickly realized that I wasn't ready yet. I think at that point in my career, it was very early on. It was probably 2011 or 12. I just don't think I had the life experience and a lot of the medical experience that I needed to be like an asset to this team. I think so. Some other opportunities presented themselves. Eventually I worked in a couple other different units, and then I found myself on the SWAT team. So I ended up working on the SWAT team for several years. And then while there, a little over a year ago, I just, I said, you know what, now's the time. I've got all my medical certs. I've got all my dive certs. I've got some good life experience. I've got a lot of good climbing experience, even more than I did back then. I think it's a good time to test. And so I ended up testing. It ended up going pretty well for me, and here I am now. We had a great man retire, and I was able to take his position when he left. So
yeah. So what does it look like when a spot opens up? How many people are competing for the same spot?
Yeah, it varies per unit. Again, because search and rescue is so specialized, you would think that a lot of people would put in for it. a lot of people want to put in for it, but the issue is a lot of people don't have the certifications for it, right? Because most police officers don't run around with a lot of medical certs. Most police officers don't have like dive certs and stuff like that too. There's plenty out there that do. So you have to have that like perfect combination of people that not only have those certifications, but then also have the drive to want to like go fly around in a helicopter all the time, which who doesn't want to do that, but it's a big ask. It's a very specialized unit. It takes a very specialized person with the right aptitude, but also, and probably more importantly, like the right attitude. And I think because of that, it kind of, I don't want to say scares people away, but it definitely gives people pause. So we're doing the best we can for like a lot of recruiting and stuff like that right now. We've got about 10 candidates lined up for the next testing that we have coming up. But yeah, the time that I tested, I think we had 3 officers that were eligible to put in. Yeah, and then we always have to test for sergeants too. So we had one additional candidate for sergeant as well. But that's only sergeants can test for a sergeant position. So yeah, so it just depends on the year and depends on eligibility. So it can be anywhere from a few. I remember the first time I tested, probably in, I think like I said, it's 2012 or 13. Somewhere in that time frame, I think there was about 10 of us that put in there too. And I don't think they took anybody off of that list. And then I think the year after that, when I didn't test, they ended up did take some officers, and they're still on the team today.
Yeah. Now, what about the volunteer capacity? So for anybody interested in like getting involved in SAR, whether it's based around Las Vegas or in their local community, like what are different avenues that people can kind of like pursue be getting involved in search and rescue? I would imagine that this kind of paid career that you're in now is pretty specialized to Las Vegas in a way. Like there's not a lot of them around the states that I'm aware of. I think a lot of them operate on volunteer only basis. Is that correct?
Yeah. We are a very unique team in that aspect. As far as being like full-time officers assigned to it, there is definitely other agencies across the country that do have a similar setup. But we definitely are unique, and a lot of that has to do with because of the fact that we are, a sheriff's department, and our sheriff does have the helicopters and stuff like that, or our agency does. So that's, back in, I think it was in the late 60s, early 70s is when it was actually written into the Nevada revised statutes, like our laws, that our sheriff's department will handle all rural search and rescue operations. And then that leaves the fire department to handle everything that's in the city, like all the urban ones. So, but as far as our volunteers are concerned, it's a lot of it comes down to word of mouth. So we've had volunteers pretty much from the beginning, and we've got some volunteers still on the team today that have been on 20 plus years as volunteers. And these are just phenomenal human beings that are out there in the community. A lot of them, we have several doctors, we have several firefighters that are both county firefighters, city firefighters, and Henderson firefighters that are all part of our volunteer cadre for the different teams. The climbers specifically, that's definitely kind of a recommendation type thing. Most of our climber volunteers are all, people like we've got guys on our team that are literally some of the original guys. When you read the guidebook, you'll see their name right next to the Curiosities. There's some of those guys are still on our team as volunteers today. So imagine how much knowledge they bring to the table, right? So those are the type of people that we'll recommend, like, hey, we've got this guy that we think would be a great asset to the team. And then we bring them in, let them come and kind of experience some of our training, see if we'd be a good fit for them and if they'd be a good fit for us. And more often than not, they are. We do sometimes, like I said, some of us are climbers. We'll run into people at the climbing gym, get to chatting with them and kind of talk about, the search and rescue team. And next thing you know, they're interested and they want to come check it out. So a lot of it kind of comes through word of mouth and recruiting like that. The other different specific ones, especially like our tactical medicine program, that one is, there's a very core community of that. We got a lot of that is made up of local doctors. We've got several anesthesiologists, several paramedics from the fire department, one nurse, and then like two trauma surgeons and one brain surgeon that are our support for our volunteers for that. So every time our SWAT team goes out, they're getting one of us as a medic and then typically a doctor coming with us too. And again, they'll recommend other doctors, and it's kind of all word of mouth with that. I was actually just chatting with a young gentleman that I know from mountain bike racing earlier today, and he was asking the very same question. He's like, hey, search and rescue seems awesome. Like, how can I do that someday? And the best thing I told him is get prepared, right? Like, get some training. What we really are looking for in candidates that want to be volunteers is knowledge, right? It's having something to bring to the table. you could be like the nicest person in the world, but it's so hard to get somebody spun up on a lot of the specialized techniques that are needed for, mountain rescue or lead climb rescue. So go out and take classes. There's so many different organizations out there. A lot of the training companies we use, like Rigging for Rescue, CMC, things like that do a ton of good schools are available to the public. There's a lot of good guide services out there like the AMGA and stuff like that can really teach you a lot of knowledge that can prepare you not only as like just a good all-around mountain person or climber or just, end user of the mountains, but it also makes you a valuable asset if you are interested in search and rescue. And then pretty much one of the other things that's I think really important is to have some sort of medical training, whether that's, an EMT, or like wilderness first aid, or first responder type things like the woofer and stuff like that. There's a lot of good training out there that again, it's serves two purposes. It makes you better when you're in the mountains, but then again, if search and rescue is something you're interested, it again makes you more valuable, something more that you can bring to the table, because most calls that we run when it comes to a rescue, they're gonna have a medical aspect to them, right? So all of those things, as far as people that are interested in volunteering, are going to be crucial, is having just like that background in it, some training. And then again, the attitude's everything, because it's a big team. When we're out there, we're one big team, trying to achieve one goal. And that usually means like saving a life or helping somebody that's lost and stranded and having one of the worst days of their life. So we need to bring like super good human beings out there to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the word volunteer can almost carry like this sense of, I don't know, lack of professionalism or a lack of like skill sets, or I don't know exactly how to word that, but it seems like like you said, the volunteers that are a part of this team, where we're talking like doctors and brain surgeons, like people who have a wild depth of experience to the point where you would imagine these roles are paid. And I think that like when I started diving into this whole search and rescue thing, like I spoke to Dean Rosnow. He was a volunteer search and rescue for the Eastern Sierra for like 30 years. And I mean, the guy did work that, you would hope someone would get paid a six-figure salary for. And like, this is the same thing with these volunteers. Like, these are super high quality, very skilled people that are just dedicating and donating their time and their 100% experience.
Agree with you. And I know what you mean too, by like it's almost like that, like part-time, or, it almost makes you feel like you're kind of like an interloper, like it's just a volunteer. You're not the real thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Come on, Jimmy, help us out.
Yeah. But it couldn't be any more further than the truth. And I said that earlier. We simply could not do our job without our volunteers. And we make sure they know that, right? Like, I was just out on a climb the other day, or on a rescue the other day with some of our volunteers. And I literally looked over at the guy and I said to him, I'm like, it just blows me away that you're out here donating your time at such a high level of what you're capable of doing. And you're doing this because you want to help people, and out of just the goodness of your heart. You literally get nothing for it other than just the satisfaction that you're out here and able to help a human. So in my mind, that makes them the actual professionals, right? Like, they're doing it for like all the right reasons. Not that we aren't. We're just lucky enough to be in a position where we get to do it as our full-time job. But these people that we have, both guys and gals, are out here doing it with their heart. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, that, in my opinion, puts them at a level above us. So
yeah, what's that one famous story about the divers that rescued those kids in the Polynesian islands
Oh,
where it
yeah,
flooded?
totally.
I watched that movie, and yeah, I mean, it's like these guys are just recreational divers, and they were the ones that were going to be able to pull it off more than the Navy divers, more than the SEALs. Like, these specialized cave divers who do it recreationally were the ones that were able to save the day, and they were 100%.
Yeah. And they literally put their lives at risk. Like, that was heinous. Like, what they had to do to get them through that situation was unbelievable. That documentary was insane, but that just goes to show, like, that's the caliber of people that we have, right? And there's people like that all over the world, and that's such an awesome thing to see.
It is. Yeah, it's really cool that I think it's a breath of fresh air to know that people of that caliber and of that skill set are just donating their time for the better of humanity.
Right.
Yeah,
definitely.
Really cool. This show is brought to you by Lives In Designs. Lives In comes from the Swedish word livsinjutare, which literally means one who lives life fully. Living life fully for us means alpine starts, long days, and tough conditions that test our gear. Lives In rises to meet that standard so that you can focus on the experience and not your clothes. Their clothing is functional, versatile, and durable, purpose-built for life in the outdoors, with a goal to inspire us to invest more in quality products so that we can own less and live more. Whether you're at the crag, high up on a wall, on a date, or at work, Livzen is there for the entire lifestyle of the outdoor enthusiast. And they have an in-house repair program. So if they rip, tear, or fall apart in any way, you can send them in to Livzen. You even get to decide whether your repair falls under warranty or wear and tear. Plus, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So you can buy it, try it, and if you still don't like it, they'll just give you your money back. Right now, you can get 15% off at Livzen by going to the link in the description below and using code TCM15 at checkout. That's the link in the description below and code TCM15 at checkout. And remember, every dollar spent at Livzen is a dollar spent supporting this podcast. I would imagine like people assume like helicopters are the most dangerous part of the SAR experience. We hear a lot of, I've heard lots of like bad things happening in helicopters, like them falling out of the sky, crashes, people dying. Is that like a reality, or is that kind of like blown up out of proportion? Like how risky do you guys feel when you're airborne?
So I'm going to be kind of biased here, and shame on me for not mentioning this earlier, because probably one of the most important parts of our team and our teammates is our pilots. And I don't think a lot of people understand this, but all of our pilots are police officers, just like all of our search and rescue officers are police officers. Every one of those pilots started just like I did as a patrol officer out there on the streets, and then took a passion, and in all cases went out and paid the money to get their own pilot's license just to be eligible to test for that.
So these are not like ex-military people?
We do have some, sure. We have some. We have a pilot right now that is also in the Army National Guard as a pilot. But a lot of them, I would say probably a majority of them, had no prior pilot experience from the military, or mostly in the private sector. I think we have had a few over the years. Actually, I know we have had a few over the years. But currently, most of them were, just police officers that just wanted to fly. And they are the best. I mean, and I'm not just saying that because they're ours. I mean, they're well known for their skills in those helicopters. So where I'm going with that is I do believe that, yes, helicopter operations are very risky. Some of the places that we have to access can be very, very dangerous for those helicopter pilots, but they are so skilled that when we're in those helicopters, sometimes it seems like you're in the safest place you could possibly be, because they're so steady, they're so calm, they're so collective. When we're talking to them on the radio, within in the helicopter, or when we're on the ground, they're so professional, and the things that they're able to do in those, sometimes you forget how dangerous it can actually be. To say that it's the most dangerous part of search and rescue, I don't know if I could say that. Is it a dangerous part? Can it be? Absolutely. But I would think that some of the other stuff that we have to do once we've made contact, especially on like the climbing side of things, when we're 6, 7, sometimes 800 feet off the ground, or even more, because Red Rock's got some massive walls out there. There's a lot going on there, a lot of moving parts. We've definitely have to be on our game. So just in general, I think there's a lot of different aspects of it, but through training, through reps, through rehearsals, both the pilots and us, we get good at what we do. And we have a lot of checks and balances in place. We have a lot of different safety protocols and stuff in place. So we do everything that we can to mitigate that risk. But at the end of the day, we're willing to take as much necessary risk that needs to be taken in order to save lives. So, but there is times, though, if we can't access it with a helicopter, we simply can't. And I mean, that happened just this weekend, where unfortunately some climbers had to spend the night. 2 separate parties had to spend the night on different climbs, because the winds and stuff were so bad that our pilots made the right decision, that because they weren't in critical danger or anything like that, hey guys, sorry, but you could be prepared to spend the night tonight, and we'll be back in the morning for you. So those things do come into play. But everything that we can possibly do to mitigate that, to make it the helicopter operations as safe as possible, we do. So, because we can always access on the ground if we have to, it's just going to take longer most of the time. So, but yeah, it can be dangerous. But again, like I said, we do everything we can to, or they do, the pilots, they're wizards in those things. What they do is just simply magic.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty neat.
How about gathering information about the rescues you're heading out to? Like, is it solely based on the person who's making the call? How are you gathering that information to properly facilitate like logistics? And how can like we as people who might be involved in a rescue better communicate with you guys to help you with your job?
So I think the latter part of your question there is probably the most important. That's what I'll start with. we always get information from somebody that we would call a person reporting or a PR, right? Whether that's a passerby that heard someone screaming for help, or it's the involved party, the actual climber, the hiker, whomever it may be. The big thing for us though is it depends, right? It depends on your cell service. It depends on if you even have cell service. It depends on if you have a PLB or a personal locator beacon, right? Which are all things that you should definitely be taking with you into the backcountry. And when I say backcountry, I mean Red Rock. Like, I know you can see the city from there, but that doesn't mean your cell phone's going to make it out. You know what I mean? And we get a lot of people that go unprepared into the mountains. So before, like, we can talk later about avoiding rescue altogether. But once the rescue situation has come, has come about, like somebody, has to be rescued because of whatever circumstances, generally we get our initial call from them or somebody that's missing them. So what we really want to educate people on is that the way to get rescued in Clark County, Nevada, so in the Las Vegas and surrounding area, is to call 911. More often than not, we have a local search and rescue volunteer team here. It's called Red Rock Search and Rescue. So we get a lot of climbers or people from out of town because, this is a big tourist destination. And the first thing they do when they get stuck is what we all do. We pull out our phones and we Google search and rescue. And a lot of times what will come right up is going to be that group of individuals. And they're awesome. Don't get me wrong. Amazing human beings, are all volunteers. They're a Mountain Rescue Association accredited team, but their job is ground searches. Anything that involves any sort of technical rescue, anything like that needs to go through us. So why I bring that up is, yes, they are super valuable and we definitely work with them sometimes for bigger searches. But if you're stuck and you're in trouble and it's an emergency, you need to call 911 because then you're skipping a step. If you call the Red Rock Search and Rescue, they do an amazing job of immediately routing it to us. But then the first thing that we do, if you're the person that's calling, is I'm going to call you back and say, hey, this might sound silly, but I need you to call 911 right now on your phone. And the reason we do that is because when you call our 911 dispatch center, you automatically are going to drop your coordinates to the dispatcher. So they're going to know exactly where you are. So that's like the first thing we need to know right away is, where are you? You could think that you're on, mountain Y, but you're actually on mountain X. You know what I mean? So the first thing we need people to do is just stay calm, take a second and call 911. The dispatcher is going to ask you as many questions as possible. If you don't have enough cell service to call 911, you can text 911. The cool thing about cell phones these days too is a lot of them now have like GPS texting and SOS texting and stuff like that. And again, you can literally just connect to a satellite, text 911. You'll get routed to our dispatch center, and then they're going to start texting back with you and getting as much information as possible. And then that immediately gets routed to my sergeant that I spoke about earlier. So once my sergeant gets that information, he usually will then turn around and make contact with that person that's calling in, whether it's the involved party or the person that, was a passerby and reported it. He's going to ask as many questions as he possibly can to make sure that we have all the information we need. I mean, he's going to get very, very granular. I mean, all the way down to how much, battery do you have left on your phone? How much food and water do you have? How much clothing do you have? All of those things. More importantly, like, what's your injuries? What's the situation? As much detail as possible. Exactly where are you? When it comes to climbing specifically, like, what route are you on? What pitch are you on? Where on the pitch are you? Like, what exactly happened? How many ropes do you have? Like, what kind of equipment? What's your experience and stuff? Is there anybody else around you that you can ask for help? I mean, they're going to ask all of those questions when we can. We have several places in Red Rock where you will not have cell service. And we get rescues all the time for people that are popping like beacons with like either like a Garmin InReach or, like the SPOT device and stuff like that. Those sometimes can take just a little bit longer. They go to kind of like a national center and then it gets kind of routed to us, but eventually it will get to us. And when I say eventually, I mean within a few minutes, we usually get it. But those ones are a lot harder for us to get information. It's a lot lengthier of a text communication that's going to go through those devices, but do your best to just, stick with it. Try to keep sending out as many messages as you can to the dispatch center over those Garmin InReaches and those types of devices. And they'll be asking the same questions and trying to get that information to us as well. Another thing that we do a lot too is we'll oftentimes ask people if they're carrying like walkie-talkies or similar devices like that. And we'll ask them, hey, what channel are you on? That way, as soon as we get flown in or hike in, we'll come up on that same channel. So when you're up on the wall, we can start talking to you as soon as we're within radio range of you if we don't have cell phone. More often than not, no. Most of the time you will have cell service. So the big thing is try to conserve battery. If you've got 2 people in your party, maybe put one phone off or in airplane mode to save battery. We will recommend that to people a lot. That way, we can keep checking in with you. So what typically happens is once our sergeant gets the information, he relays it. He'll dispatch a few of us. We'll start rounding up some volunteers if we need them, and then we'll start heading your way. Me personally, I usually like to call the people and just say, tell them, hey, I'm Jared. I'm on my way to help you. Tell me more. I know you've already asked me this, certain questions, but it kind of puts people, I feel like, at ease when we're able to talk to them and kind of, give them a name of like who's coming to help them and give them a voice to talk to. It can help with morale, and it can kind of calm the situation down. And then that gives me the opportunity to kind of get even more information. I can get very specific to what I'm coming out there to assist you with. So we do everything that we possibly can. Best case scenario, right? Cell phone, we can talk. If you don't have that, just do your best to get as much information out there as possible. And that way we can get to you as quickly as possible and bring the appropriate supplies that we need too, because depending on what kind of injury you have, it could depend on how much gear we bring. So it's super important that we know all of that.
Are there any other ways to use the radios? Because I'm a huge proponent of using radios. I think it's super, super helpful, especially for these multi-pitch climbs. Let's say we're out of cell phone service and all I have is a radio. Is there some sort of technique, like scanning channels to find someone that might be in range that might have cell phone service? Are there certain channels that might be first ones to try, that might be like local communities that have radios that are active? Like, are there sneaky ways to use radios to try to get in contact with people?
And I got this from a ski patrol friend of mine once too, is it seems like channel one seems to be like, if you want to go to a channel and just start trying to talk to people, channel one's probably a good one to go to. I'm not saying that that's like a standard by any means, but some other things you could do to prepare would be, if you're going to go on a climb and you're parking your car at Pine Creek or something like that, put a note on your dash, climbing, we're going to be in Pine Creek climbing on Birdland, whatever.
It's a pretty common ice climbing thing.
Yeah, no, totally. And ice climbing for sure. But also put on there, hey, we've got Rocky Talkies. We're going to be on channel 21, privacy 4 or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, put that on your dash, because one of the big things that we always ask people on the phone too is like, hey, where's your car? Or we'll talk to someone's wife that's out missing and be like, hey, where did they park their car? Well, I think they were parking at Oak Creek. Cool. We'll go to Oak Creek. We always send officers on the ground first, like actual resident officers that work out there. That way they can go out there, they'll check the car. Yep, it's here. And they'll look on the dash. They know to do that. And then they can get as much information from that too, like how many are in your party, when you left, what your itinerary was, what you were going to climb, when you were coming back, like just a few specifics like that. And a radio channel would be one of those good things too. That way, if you didn't have cell service and weren't able to make contact, we know you're missing. We can come in there and start trying to make contact. Because a lot of those ranges, a lot of those radios, especially when you're pretty high up on a wall, they're going to reach out pretty far onto the valley floor below, and we'll be able to start communicating with you pretty soon. So, yeah. Other than that, the radios, I don't know, and shame on me for not knowing this if it does exist. I don't know of any public radio channels that are set aside specifically for emergencies. I have not heard of that. So,
what about some other things about SAR that people probably don't know, but they should?
Totally. I think one of the biggest ones, the biggest misconception, and I can only speak about the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, right? The search and rescue team here in Las Vegas. The biggest concern that we get from people is, it's usually the first question they ask us once we're there and we start making the situation safe, is, how much is this going to cost me? It's understandable. I know there is search and rescue teams out there that charge, and that's a thing. We don't, and simply because we are a police department. Our tax dollars pay for these rescues. They pay for us as a service to come out and help you. And why I bring that up is because I know for a fact that we have had several individuals that have been in extreme emergencies that have waited way too long to call because they were afraid of incurring the costs of a helicopter coming to save them, or sending 10 people or 4 people out to help them. How much is that going to cost? And that is a huge fear for people. And that's what we want to get out there, is we don't want to be abused as a team. And I don't think we ever are, but I know there's times where we should have been called and we weren't, simply because people were afraid that it was going to be a $50,000 or some arbitrary number of a bill to come and save their lives. That's not something to worry about. If you're in trouble and you need help, call. That's simply put, it's that simple. That's definitely, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions out there about search and rescue. I can't really think of any other off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I
though.
mean, that's a big one. Before speaking with you, I didn't even know that.
Right.
Hannah just felt the same thing. I think that's like pretty widespread misunderstanding that people have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a scary thing if you think about it, right? Because again, I can tell you for certainty, I know of situations where people didn't call and they should have because they were afraid. You know what I mean? I can't tell you how many times a really funny story that's actually a climbing rescue. We had a group of 2 climbers that were stuck on dark shadows. Excuse me, not dark shadows. They were on Prince of Darkness, another scary dark name, right? So we had 2 climbers stuck on Prince of Darkness, young climbers visiting, very knowledgeable, very experienced. They got their rope stuck on the wrap and were having an epic, and it was now nighttime. And they finally made the decision they were going to call. So they did. And they did what I said earlier. They Googled search and rescue. So they called the local Red Rock search and rescue volunteer team, which then had the route to call. So by the time we finally get in touch with them, they had waited too long because they were afraid of the fees. I make contact with them and I say, hey, I'm over here at Late Night Trailhead. Just wanted to give you guys an update as soon as the helicopter gets here. And at this point, I'm sorry, I was texting them. So I'm texting them, hey, I'm at Late Night. As soon as the helicopter gets here, we'll be on the way. And we'll be to you within minutes. And literally within seconds, my phone rings. And I'll never forget this is just the typical climber. I was like, hey, bro, like, is the helicopter necessary? Like, we're climber bums, dude. Like, we don't have any money, man. Like, can you guys just hike in? Like, we'll stay. You know what I mean? We just need help. But like, and I'm like, and mind you, this was not just like a perfect day. This was a winter night, like risk of hypothermia. Like, these dudes did not stand a chance if they were going to stay on that wall that night. Like, it can be very serious out there. Those mountains can be brutal. And I told him right away, I said, man, don't worry about that. Just, we're coming to get you. But again, like it just comes right down to it. Like, that's everybody's biggest fear. And it shouldn't be. Like, the help is available. If you have reached your threshold, whatever that is, we're not here to judge. If you've reached your threshold, we want you to call us as soon as possible, as opposed to waiting until you're more fatigued, in more trouble, and then it just becomes an epic or, you know, leads to disastrous circumstances because you waited too long and started making mistakes and things like that, trying to get out of the situation. So call us. That's it. That's the biggest, like, I think, myth that I would, you know, want to, I guess, bust.
Totally.
Like, if you know what I mean.
I think the one caveat to that is that there's still like if you're following the paper trail, like after you're rescued and then you get put in the ambulance, then the bills start.
Totally.
So
yeah.
As long as people understand that.
100%.
But I mean, if you're in a point where you need an ambulance, like you're going to need it regardless. So totally. It's like at least getting there is free.
Exactly. And that's the big thing. And that's another thing that I guess we should probably throw out there too, is we don't do transports to the hospital. So we are simply getting you out of the bad situation to a place where we can get you to an ambulance, sometimes to Mercy Air, depending on how severe injuries are, how severely sick or hurt you are. Up to that point, that's a service that we provide. Once you get to those, it's just like if you were in a car accident on the surface streets out in Las Vegas. You get into that ambulance, you know, you're going to have to, you know, your insurance, however that works out, you'll have to incur those fees and take care of that at a later date. But the actual rescue itself, which is usually what's the scariest part for people as far as expenses are concerned, like that's something we don't charge for.
Yeah. And then just to be clear, that's specific with Las Vegas.
Correct. Yeah. I can only speak about our agency and here in Clark County when it comes to
on
that.
The Sierra. Jared said it was free.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yosemite, or, you know, somebody's gonna be up in British Columbia or something and be like, nope. They said search and rescue is free. No, we're just talking about here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. I think that's really important to dispel. So that's awesome. We'll get back to talking in just 1 minute, but first, I need to tell you about my favorite climbing pants. Livezen's EcoTrek trail pants are by far the best climbing pants I've worn in my entire 12 years of climbing. Durable, flexible, lightweight, and packed with useful features like zippered pockets, an internal waistband drawstring, and a unique leg roll-up system. Other climbing pants don't even come close. Either the fit is terrible, they wear out in a single season, or you can only wear them climbing. Livezen's EcoTrek trail pants are unique in the fact that they're rugged enough to climb in and still classy enough to go out on a date in. You're essentially getting 2 pairs of pants for the price of 1. Plus, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can buy them, try them, and if you still don't like them, they'll just give you your money back. Right now, you can get 15% off your next pair of Livezen EcoTrek trail pants by going to the link in the description below and using code TCM15 at checkout. That's the link in the description below and code TCM15 at checkout. And remember, Every dollar spent at Lives In is a dollar spent supporting this podcast. What's the most common mistake you see that climbers make that leads people to get stuck, or like mistake or circumstance?
So I think that probably I would say the most common thing that we run across, and Red Rock is famous for this, is stuck ropes. That's our typical one where people, and it's usually always on the rappel. I shouldn't say usually always. I would say most often it's on the rappel and people get their rope stuck. Yes, there's tricks and different ways of doing self-rescue and all of that stuff. But as far as your question is concerned, the biggest one where people are uninjured is typically because of ropes being stuck. And I would say that a close second to that would be when people get off route. And that happens quite often out here as well. People will look at like the guidebook, and Red Rocks is famous for like its classics, right? It's moderate classics specifically. 5.6s, 5.7s, 5.8s, even 5.9s that are just world class, like epinephrine specifically. And you look at them in the guidebook and you're like, oh man, cool, I'm gonna go climb this. It's, 9, 10 pitches of 5.6, 5.7, just beautiful rock. Let's go. But they don't realize A, how big that actually is, and B, how tricky some of these routes can be when it comes to actually like route finding, following like the path of least resistance. The Red Rock Stone Masters from back in the day came up with some really creative routes out there. And we'll oftentimes get people that go off route, and the next thing you know, they're in some just crazy terrain that they can't protect. There's, nothing to even build anchors in. So that actually happens quite frequently. That was another rescue that we had just yesterday, actually, where we had two people on, again, one of these classic 5.7s. They went off route into terrain that wasn't even a route. So it was chossy. There was no places for protection. And we had two climbers that ended up having to spend the night in their stance. Like the leader was still on lead the entire night, found himself a nice little ledge to chill on, had no place to, place pro. It was dark. The rock was crumbly. He couldn't safely down climb it. Unsure if the gear below him was even good, so those two situations are what we see most often. And they're honest mistakes. Getting a rope stuck, there's just sometimes that just simply cannot be avoided. Now, is there ways to, be prepared and know how to get them unstuck? In some cases, yes, but there's other cases where we've had very experienced climbers who've gotten their ropes proper stuck. And because of the circumstances of how it was stuck, where it was stuck, things like that, and they didn't have enough rope left over to free it, they needed help, and that's okay. So call, you know what I mean? So
Call before you start jugging up your rope on a...
Yeah, that's wrapped around a flake or something like that. Exactly. Yeah. Call before you do something that can kill you. Like, that's the big thing. You know what I mean? Because we'll always get we're pretty famous as a team for posting a lot of our rescues and stuff on social media. And, we'll go through the comments, we'll read them. And the keyboard warriors love to come out and just hate on the victims and, how dumb, you could have done this, you could have done that. And that's almost laughable to me. It's silly, because if you're not there, you don't know. We don't post details as far as who climbed and who they were and how much experience they have. That's not important. That's not relevant. All that matters is that people needed help and we came and helped them. So don't, Monday morning quarterback people just saying, oh, I wouldn't have happened to me, because it can happen to anyone. And that's another thing that I think is super important, is that you need to understand that anybody, like, climbing is inherently dangerous. Anybody can find themselves in a situation where they need to be rescued. And we have rescued very experienced climbers, and it's just part of climbing. So keep that in mind. You know what I mean? Have a plan, be prepared, but just understand too that there is times where you need help.
Yeah, there's like no shame in calling for rescue
100%,
if you need it.
100%.
Yeah.
There's no shame in calling for rescue.
Yeah. Maybe if you were a keyboard warrior and you shamed people, maybe you should at least have some guilt.
Totally.
For what you did in the past.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So you talked about these classic climbs, epinephrine and Crimson Chrysalis is also another one. I would imagine you see a lot of rescues on those two particular routes.
Yeah. I think we've done at least 3 that I can think of just off the top of my head right now on Crimson alone. There's a dedicated wrap route on that route now.
That's particularly what I want to dive into is Are people getting their rope stuck on the dedicated wrap route, or are they getting their rope stuck trying to rappel the actual lead route?
So the three that I can think of right now off the top of my head, one was just yesterday. We're on the dedicated wrap route. That one definitely takes some finesse, like all climbs in Red Rock. You know, having good rope pulling technique is pretty critical out here, period. As it is in most areas, but like we're known for our Velcro, like, you know, sandstone with flakes galore. And there is a couple sections on that rappel route that if, you know, if it's windy like it was yesterday, there's very little you can do to avoid that. And sometimes ropes just do what they want to do. Like, you know, there's a reason Indiana Jones could snap his whip around stuff and like, you know, like I've seen ropes clove around flakes to where you are not getting that done. Like you could, you know, we've had people try to MA their ropes off of stuff and you're not going to, you know what I mean? And we go up and on a couple of those, we've accessed from the top. And as we come down, we're able to free their rope and we'll look at it and be like, oh, wow, I had one on Crimson where their rope literally cloved around a flake just when they were pulling it. And, you know, is there ways that you can pull rope to avoid that? In most cases, yes, but there's sometimes circumstances, you know, and especially after a big route like that and fatigue is set in, you know, maybe you didn't give the perfect flick or you pulled too fast or whatever.
Yeah. Do you have any like very quick, subtle things people could try to do when they pull ropes out here that would lead to a less chance of them getting stuck? Obviously, there's a sense of chaos there, but
Yeah, I think the first one would be to make sure you pull out your knots. We have had that. You know, we have had people forget to pull their knot out and maybe didn't remember that they forgot to pull it out, so it's stuck, you know, whatever
up
they
at the chains.
Yep, up at the chains or up the wrap rings or something like that. So you make sure you clear your knots.
Still too scary to jug back up because it could pop through the wrap
Yeah,
ring.
and one particular one that I can think of, like they didn't even remember if they thought they did pull their knot, right? So if you thought you pulled your knot and you didn't, because again, fatigue, you're on your sixth rappel or whatever, you know, you can't get complacent when it comes to climbing, period. But the end of the day, the coming down is oftentimes more dangerous than the going up. And that's also the time that you're at your worst, right? Like you're tired, like you've just done a big thing and it's time to get down. So that would be like the first one. And that's not so subtle. Like that's just like, hey, take a minute, do your buddy check. Hey, I took the knot out, confirm. Like do it on everyone. Like that might sound like just like a nerdy thing to do.
I always make sure I have the rope go through my hand.
Totally.
So that way, like it literally has to be undone for it to go past me.
Very good. Yeah. Like little trips like that. Absolutely. And then I think a big thing out here too is pull slow. You know what I mean? Like really pull nice and gradual. And not just when you're pulling the rope, but try to be managing that line as it's coming down to you too, because we'll get people that get the rope stuck below them when they let it just go crazy down the wall. So do as much as you can to like have good rope maintenance and just housekeeping as you're doing these things. But as you're pulling nice and slow, and then when you get that moment where you know it's about to, like, you can feel it, right? We all know what that feels like. That's the time where you want to try to get it away from the wall as much as possible, right? Like get that thing out. Like don't pull it straight down. Try to get it to come out so that way it will start clearing some of those features and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned multiple good things there. I think not only trying to rope or route the rope when you're pulling, but route the rope when you're rappelling. As you're rappelling, like watch the features. What is the rope going on over, especially as the last one to rappel? If you're doing, you know, parties of two, like choose where the line is so that when you're rappelling, like you're think, okay, well, like the rope's going to fall this way. Like, ooh, that's a really sketchy flake. Let me put the route over here, a rope over here. Like you can plan all of that on the way down.
Yeah, absolutely. And two other things I think are really important to talk about when we're on the subject of rappelling and getting rope stuck. One of my pet peeves, and I see this all the time on Mountain Project and like different comments or just in comments on general on the internet, is people really push for you not to put knots in the end of your rope out here. And it drives me crazy. It's literally a nation worldwide, the number one killer of like people rappelling and deaths when it comes to rappelling is rappelling off the end of their ropes. I mean, experienced climbers. There was one in Yosemite not too long ago. You know what I mean? Put a knot in the end of your rope. If you're concerned that that knot is going to get caught somewhere on the wall as you're going down the wall, then learn how to saddlebag your ropes. Have good techniques for rope management, especially with the winds that we get out here. Pretty much anytime I'm out there rappelling on like a good wall, unless it's something like, you know, in black velvet where it's just smooth and you can see all the way down it, I'm saddlebagging my ropes. If I'm doing a double rope rappel or a single rope rappel, it doesn't matter. The ropes are managed. They're on me. and I'm managing those down there. And then I'm also, I'm maintaining those ends while my partner rappels and stuff too. I'm giving them a fireman's belay, and that might be the SAR nerd in me, but my dad taught me, from a very young age, like you can never be too safe in the mountains. Another big thing that I always do with anybody that I'm out climbing with, and I suggest other people do, is we get everybody set up on rappel together, and we double check each other, and we'll stack each other on the lines at the anchor, check each other's systems. We always have like a third hand, some sort of backup. And then once we've safety checked each other, then we start rappelling. And that can alleviate a lot of these accidents and stuff too. So I know we kind of went off on a tangent there as far as ropes getting stuck, but those are just like all good techniques that I think could save a lot of people a lot of time. Not necessarily save them from getting rescued, but how many times have you been frustrated on a rappel because you had to traverse all over the wall to unstick your rope from 17 different flakes and stuff like that?
I think I've climbed Black Orpheus, like a very beginning of my climbing career out here. We wrapped down the gully instead of actually doing like the walk off.
Oh, okay.
And
the painted bull,
all the way, like the gully just to the east of the solar slab.
Yep. Okay.
And yeah, it was epic. We had to cut my friend's brand new rope. And it was like, we just left it hanging there. We didn't know what we were doing. After that incident, I was like terrified of rappelling, just because I'm like, even Hannah in the beginning, when we started climbing, I was like, oh, we're rappelling now. Like now it's time to be scared. Like I had so much anxiety built up around like the rope's going to get stuck. Like I was like neurotic about how I pulled it, and it would like, I don't know. I like the anxiety I had around it almost made the situation worse, where I was like getting my rope stuck more and more. It was like this self-fulfilling prophecy. And now like I've gotten a lot more chill about it. I found that thinner ropes out here don't get stuck as much. Like a 9.2, 8.9, 9.1, like those thinner ropes tend to, slide through the patina a lot better. And then, yeah, like you said, anybody who's saying like, don't tie your knots because if you pull the rope up, it's going to get stuck, just saddlebag.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many different techniques. Saddlebagging is a big one too. I mean, just clothing the ends of the ropes to yourself so you have the ends. I mean, there's a ton of different ways, you know what I mean? And the other thing too is like the condition of your gear. Like a new rope is going to pull a lot better than an old fuzzy rope that should have been retired. You know what I mean? Things like that too. So take good care of your gear. But yeah, climbing ropes have come a long ways, man. Like they're nice and light now and like still like super good. But yeah, they definitely pull better. But that anxiety you were talking about, I still get that. And I think that's because I'm hyper aware of like how important it is to rappel safely. You know what I mean? And I think that anxiety should be kind of in everybody's head. Like, don't get complacent. Don't overlook rappelling, because it can literally, make a good day bad real quick if you mess it up. And we don't go to the climbing gym and practice rappelling. You know what I mean? We practice climbing all the time, and then, just wing it sometimes when it comes to rappelling. Not saying everybody's winging it, but there's just a lot that can go wrong in rappelling. So really stay focused on that, have a good plan for it. Don't be afraid to jump on the YouTube and the interwebs and check out some different techniques and stuff like that to make yourself a more well-rounded, mountain athlete. It's just going to make it a better, enjoyable experience for everybody.
I had someone say recently, we all talk about risk tolerance as climbers, and we can be like bolder, we can go run out, we can space gear, we can climb more bold routes. And he said, be a bold climber, but don't be a bold rappeller. Like, don't take the same risk tolerance you allocate yourself to climbing and apply that to rappelling. You don't have a margin for error when you rappel. Like, follow the systems, don't get complacent, tie your knots, double check your system, communicate with your partner. Like, that's the time to not take on any extra risk just because you want to be efficient or cool or lazy or whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. We make mistakes climbing all the time. If we didn't, we wouldn't progress, right? Like we push ourselves to the limit to get better climbing. You're out on your whatever project, and if you're not falling, then you're probably not climbing at your hardest level. So you can afford to make mistakes there. You can't afford to make any mistakes when it comes to rappelling. Like, you can't, simply put. You know what I mean? Like, so that's like probably I'm probably gonna steal that saying. Be a bold climber, but not a bold rappeller. Yeah.
We talked about, opening up the concept of a free rescue. I think that like, obviously we don't want people to abuse it. So let's talk about like, where's the line between I need a rescue and I need to figure this out myself?
Yeah. And that's the $1 million question, right? Like, pun intended. No. Yeah. It's not $1 million question, because we were talking about rescues being free, but It's subjective, and there is no line, right? And I'll give you a good example. I had a group of climbers on group therapy, so Angel Food Wall, right, White Rock area out there, and they had just had an epic day. We had one quasi experienced climber, and then they were a party of three, two brand new like first multi pitch, right? The experienced climber wasn't a guide or anything like that, but he knew his way around ropes. He knew how to trad climb, place gear safely, things like that. He was managing his group fine, but he had two people that were just having an epic. Like one of the parties lost some climbing shoes at one point. They started at 7 a.m. They finally called us at, I want to say around midnight. We got the call that they were stuck, and it came across one of the PLBs I was talking about earlier. I can't remember the brand. It's not a Garmin, but one similar. And we get the call that they're out there. We fly in. They've got headlamps, thank goodness. So we were able to spot them right away. And where they were was at the base of the last pitch. So they were right underneath. There's like kind of like a little cave, like alcove up there below. I think that's the sixth pitch, if I remember correctly. It's been a minute since I've been on that route. They weren't hurt. They weren't injured. They weren't stuck. They had all their climbing equipment. They were safe in this alcove, but they had reached their mental threshold for sure. Like they were done. Like in endurance sports, there's bonking. They mentally bonked. And, I remember that particular post. There were so many haters in the comments. Like, you should make them pay, and like, how dare them? And you don't understand though, like people like that, if they've reached that limit where they're ready to throw in the towel and they just can't go on anymore, we don't want them trying to go on. You don't want people like that trying to figure it out if they are so mentally fried because they've had an epic day. So it's not fair to say that they can't call, but the guy that, broke his leg can, like, so I don't feel like there is a line that you can draw in the sand where, this qualifies and this doesn't. Like, if you need help, we will do everything we can to help you. We're going to talk to you about it. We're going to ask you about it. If it sounds like you're in a safe position and it's nighttime and it's not safe for us to come out and get you, we might ask you to wait till the morning. In fact, oftentimes we will, because we got to keep it safe as we can for us too, right? So if you're, prepared to stay for an overnight and you have all the layers and stuff that you need, and, you're just in a bad situation, hey, that's what bivvying is all about. It's going to build some character, and we'll come get you in the morning when it's safer for us to do so. But you're not wrong for calling. And I think that's the most important message that we need to get out there to people is it's okay. You're a different human than the person on the pitch, like below you or the climb next to you. You don't know like what they're going through, and they don't know what you're going through. So, you got to take all that, like that bigger picture into account. And we're pretty good about that as a team, of really communicating with our people that call us to figure out exactly what's going on. And oftentimes, if you need help, and this is what we tell people all the time. People love to apologize and say, oh, I'm so sorry. We're like wasting your time and this and that and the other thing. First thing I tell them is you did the right thing by calling. If you think you need to call, you probably need to call. You know what I mean? I mean, it's in my opinion, it's that simple. If you think you're in that specific of a situation where your life's in danger, call. It's that simple.
How would you handle someone who is blatantly abusing it? I'm on the top of Wilson and I don't want to walk off. And so I call and I fake an injury or whatever it is. Like, how do you handle someone who does something like that? And do you have any actual anecdotal experience?
I'll answer the second part first. I don't have any anecdotal experience of somebody faking an injury to get rescue. Again, we do call screening. We do offer a lot of assistance over the phone in times like that too. We have been able to resolve rescues over the phone when we get people that are calling in because they're confused, scared, whatever the case may be. We can walk them through like, hey, do you have cell service? Because I'm talking to you on the phone right now. You do? Cool. Let's download this app called Gaia or OnX or something like that real quick. You know what I mean? In situations like that. Or, hey, start looking around. Do you see any pile of rocks? We call those cairns. See if you can find one of those. All right. Do you have a headlamp? Cool. So like there's a lot of times where we can walk people down out of that. Now, let's say the hypothetical that you discussed comes up where we get somebody that's like just gassed and they're like, screw this. I'm not hiking off this mountain. I've had enough. And they call in and they're like, oh, I think I broke my ankle or whatever. And we get out there and you're totally fine. We do have it. It is written in like our policies, and that you can be charged when they are egregious and stuff like that. And it's almost under the guidelines of like misuse of 911, because again, we're a police department, right? So it's the same thing if you called in like a fake police like shooting or something like that, and you can be convicted of that kind of stuff. So that could technically fall under those guidelines, but that's just not something that we typically see, especially in the climbing world. Climbers, I mean, that's the one thing I love about this community is that's just not usually like the people that we all know as climbers. I will say on our mountain rescue side, we do have rescues more frequently than I'd like to admit, where it's people in sometimes like drug induced mental crises that we have to go out and find, that have gone wandering and just kind of gone off the rails and found themselves in some crazy places, and they're calling loved ones. They're not usually calling us, they're calling loved ones saying, I'm going to harm myself or things like that, and I'm going to go climb up this mountain and jump off this cliff. And those ones can be, I would say, if there was ever a rescue that was quasi frustrating, it would be situations like that. And we've actually had quite a few of those in the recent time period, where people are under the influence of certain narcotics and things like that, and out being, whether it's suicidal or just being like having a bad day and, being unruly, and they, want to play hide and seek. And we have to go out and try to find them, because we do have a duty as a police department to save lives. So we do have to go out and try to find some of these people. And those ones can be, I hate to use the word frustrating, but they can be, when you have a person that doesn't want to be found, but we have to go try to find you. And then when we do find you, you want to be combative. Like, we've had that. And that's kind of a bummer when you think about it, when we're actually trying to save you and get you out of like a very critical situation, and you want to resist and like, you know what I mean? Like, we've had, not personally with me, but we've had one of our officers actually have to like subdue someone that was trying to swing at them, on a rescue, because they were, yeah. And I use the term rescue loosely on that one. It was, they were, high on illegal narcotics, and, like, so that's a rare thing, but it does happen, you know what I mean? So, but as far as more specifically to the climbing, it's just not something that we typically see. If you're climbing and you're in a bad spot and you think you need to call, just call. Like, there's not going to be any retribution for that or any blowback from that. You know what I mean?
Let's be real for a second. The blueprint for a successful climbing podcast is simple. Interview the most famous climbers in the world. Big names mean big followings, lots of SEO power, and a built-in audience that helps promote every episode. But this show has never been about that. From the beginning, it has been my mission to bring you stories from the climbing majority. The climbers who don't live in the limelight. The ones who quietly put up routes, build communities, and help give back in ways that are rarely recognized. And while that's what makes this show special, it also means we have an uphill battle when it comes to growth. And that is where you come in. If you believe in the show, if you've been fired up, inspired by an episode, word of mouth is the single most powerful way to help the show. Share an episode with a friend. Post about us on social media, jump onto Reddit threads and Mountain Project forums, and tell people what you've been listening to. Also, I am on a mission to beat Climbing Gold's Spotify review count. If you haven't already left this show a review, please head on over to Spotify to give this show 5 stars. We only have 1,000 more ratings to go. For your from call to response time, obviously it varies dramatically depending on the location of the actual rescue, but like, what would you say a typical response time is for a on the wall rescue?
Sure. Again, there's a lot of variables that play into this too. First of all, I'd start with like severity of injury. So you take a whipper and break an ankle, or, break an arm, something like that. That's a lot different than you, let's say, breaking like a femur or having a laceration and you're bleeding out. It's things that are more critical. So we kind of categorize our rescues. We use like just a simple system of level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 being like life-threatening. Level 3 being, you could probably stay the night. Level 2s are usually where we have that like broken ankle, something kind of like a minor break, some sort of minor or moderate injury on the wall. Those ones, we're going to activate the team. We're going to get the team start heading that way. But that's kind of like that normal police call where we're not using lights and sirens. So we'll start heading that way. And it's again, there's other factors that play into it. I happen to live very close to like where our helicopters are and our office is located out. So it's usually quick for me to get to our office and then just get on a helicopter and start heading your way. Some of the other guys live closer to Red Rock. So it's quicker for them to just head out to a staging area out there. But yeah, we have to assemble resources. But I would typically say, like on a moderate climb like that, we're going to be moving and getting into the area easily in under an hour. Okay. Again, we're talking about these like moderate type injuries. In under an hour, we'll be mobilized and in the area, whether that's at the trailhead or at a staging area where we can start flying people into for access. So then the other variables kick in, and that is like, where are you? Like, what route are you on? Are you just doing some sport climbing, like in Black Corridor, where we can easily just hike back into? Or are you up on one of the bigger walls in the canyons where, we've got to fly into? And then it comes into play as far as like, where are you on the wall? Are you dead center? Are you closer toward the bottom where it's faster for us to climb up? Are you closer to the top where it's faster for us to get inserted at the top and come down to you? So those variables come into play too. But I mean, hypothetically, let's say you're on dark shadows, right? Just regular dark shadows, and you're on like the third pitch in that beautiful corner and you break an ankle and stuff like that. We can get to you to the base of that climb easily in under an hour. And then a couple of us could easily start climbing up to you. And let's be honest, we could probably access you in probably 30 minutes from the ground, climbing up to you on a climb like that. So again, you can see where like all these variables and stuff come into play. We are one of the few teams in the country, and don't quote me on this, it's just not a very common thing. We have the ability to access and insert climbers directly on the wall in some cases. So on certain climbs where we have ledge systems that have anchors on them, which a lot of the climbs out here do, and if there's enough blade clearance, there's a lot of times where we can actually hoist rescuers directly into the wall. We use a very specialized piece of equipment from Petzl. It's called a Lazard. And what it allows us to do is I can just direct attach myself as I'm hanging on the end of like our hoist cable to an anchor that I can quickly build on the wall. Like our pilots are skilled enough to where they can keep that helicopter stable. They can hoist me down. I can get close enough to the wall where I can literally, preferably bolts. I can fire into a couple bolts, equalize an anchor real quick, and then I can attach the Lazard, which allows me to attach myself and the helicopter on a releasable system, which sounds very convoluted and terrifying. But the big thing is that we don't ever want the helicopter attached to a wall, right? That's why most teams aren't trying to like insert climbers directly on a route. But it is one thing that gives us an advantage, and we do use it quite frequently. I think I've used it 3 times in the last 6 months where I've been able to access right above or right below climbers that are on a route and be able to just go into an anchor, quickly detach from the helicopter, and now I'm on the wall. I've got all my ropes and stuff with me. My partner gets brought in, or a volunteer. I can get them in quick to my anchor too. And then we're only, 70 meters above you at that point, like a rope length, you know what I mean? So now we can just wrap down to you. So in situations like that, where we're able to do, those kind of inserts, we can be to you even quicker. Sometimes we can actually be to you on the wall in less than an hour, and that's not unheard of. But again, it's all dependent on so many different variables on the climb. But yeah, even on something like that where you're injured and it's, not life-threatening, we're still hustling. We're getting to you.
Yeah, that was my next question. Are you changing the speed and tactics based on the severity, like the 1, 2, 3? Like, are you treating them all the same in terms of like how you respond to them? Or like, are you allocating more facilities and taking it a bit more like time constraints for these more critical situations?
Sure, that's an excellent question. And the short answer is both. We're treating them the same in the level of care that we're going to provide you. But a level 1, like the one we had this past, what was that, Saturday? So like the one we had on Saturday, that's a true level 1. On something like that, I'm using I parked my marked police vehicle out front of your house. Like I have lights and sirens like any other police vehicle. I'm using those just like it's an emergency because it's life threatening. And I'm using that to get me as close as I can to you or to that helicopter. And then we are getting on that helicopter as fast as possible. We're conducting our mission and our safety brief on the way to you to just go like, full stop, get everything to you as efficiently and safely as possible. But we are definitely going at a different pace than we would be as opposed to, a broken ankle. Broken ankle, we're always concerned about our safety too. And so if we don't have to push it, because let's be honest, driving around with lights and sirens is dangerous. You know what I mean? So if I can't arrive, and this is any police officers that will watch this on our department are gonna laugh when I say this, but it's a common phrase that we have on our department. If you can't arrive, you can't assist. But it's so true, right? Like if I get hurt on the way to you, like now I'm just a casualty, and now that's going to delay your care. So yeah, we do up the ante a little bit and expedite the process when it comes to how severe the injuries and stuff are. But then once we get there, the level of care that we provide you is going to be the same. Like, you know what I mean? If that kind of answers your question.
Totally. Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. What injury, like for us as climbers, when we get injured, like what are some injuries that look worse than they actually are? Things that might actually cause a bit more panic and terror, but actually aren't like immediately life-threatening, versus ones that might go unnoticed or look a bit minor to an untrained eye, but are actually more critical than we think.
Yeah, that's an excellent question too. Broken bones freak people out, right? Dislocations freak people out. I think starting with the ones that are minor, but like maybe to you seem way more severe, I would start with those. And that would be like, a dislocated knee. I had one of those in Icebox Canyon where a dude was, climbing on a climb in there, on the refrigerator wall. And literally he's, doing a drop knee and totally dislocates his knee and causes him to fall. And his partner lose his, like, oh my gosh, he literally calls in and I quote says, my partner just like exploded his femur. So,
oh wow, you're like level one.
So we get out there quick. I'm getting hoisted into him. And as I'm getting hoisted in, I see the guy like waving me down, freaking out, the Blair. And he's on like the ledge at the base of this route. And I'm like, are you guys, I'm like trying to yell over the helicopter. He's waving at me and stuff like that. So finally the helicopter kind of gets out of there so I can hear him. I'm like, hey man, like, where is he at? And he's like, oh, he's right there. He's rappelling down. And sure enough, I look up and the injured party's rappelling down. Like, so I talk to him, hey, like, are you okay? Like as he's coming down, I get up scramble up on the ledge and he just rappels right down to me. And he's like, yeah, man, it was crazy. My knee exploded and now it's fine. It popped back into place. And I'm like, who has the broken femur? So again, I'm not saying they were wrong for calling. Like from the Blair's perspective, and they had very limited cell service, the only thing he was able to get out is like, my partner's femur just exploded, which is a life-threatening injury. And that kind of answers both of your questions too. So, that's what we think when we get out there. And it turns out he just dislocated his knee, which hurts like, crazy. And it looks gnarly, let's admit. But at the end of the day, it popped back in on his own as he kind of just started working his way down the wall. And we still flew him out because he couldn't walk. I mean, his knee was hammered. And like, anybody that's hiked back into that canyon knows that approach is pretty burly. We don't want somebody, further injuring themselves. So it was just way easier for us to extract them with the hoist and get them out of there and get them to an ambulance. But that was a good example of one of those situations where the injury looked way worse than it was. It just looks bad, but it really not that bad. Can it be? For sure. Like you can do some bad stuff with dislocations. And that's the tricky thing with medical stuff is there's so much stuff that can happen inside of our body that like you can't see with the naked eye. And unfortunately, a lot of times you can't even treat out there. Like even a dislocation can interrupt a lot of nerves, a lot of vessels, and start causing some serious damage. Stuff that is on like the other end of that spectrum that maybe doesn't look that bad, but is way worse. Saturday would be a good example of that. Head injuries, neck and spine injuries. Those are the ones that are terrifying. Internal bleeding. So let's be honest, climbing, we already said it's dangerous, but falls can be traumatic. Like you can do some massive damage to some organs that are not that well protected, liver and spleen, things like that. Like you fall wrong and smack one of the sides of your body and stuff like that, man, you could feel like you broke a rib, but you might be, bleeding internally from like your spleen or your liver. And that's life-threatening. I mean, you can lose all your blood in your abdomen, literally, without even knowing it. And from the outside, at first, you might not even be able to tell. You might just have somebody that's in pain and complaining like, oh man, my rib really hurts or something like that. And underneath that spleen's just leaking. So those are the ones where it's like, those are tricky, right? And even as a climber or, as the belayer, like, man, I think he's okay. Let me just call. And yeah, my buddy fell and he's complaining that his side hurts, but he seems okay. He's just in some pain and stuff like that. and nobody knows. So it's tough to say on things like that. And then again, I'll come back to the head injuries. Head injuries are another one that oftentimes look way worse than they are, right? So first of all, wear a helmet, right? Like my son is an avid climber, 17. He is like, he's the nerd at the crag sport climbing with the helmet on, and I love it. And he does it every time. He'll send me pictures and he's always got his helmet on. I'm so proud of him because I'm like, dude, even sport climbing, you never know, right? But even with helmets on, you can still get head injuries. But the thing about the head is that it bleeds so much. Like how many times have people cut their head and there's just blood everywhere, and it just a little bit of blood can sometimes look like a lot of blood. So a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, he split his head open, there's just blood everywhere, and it just seems like it's super traumatic, and sometimes it's really not. It's just a cut on the head, So
I would imagine like losing consciousness is probably not a good
100%. Yeah, so that's a good that's pretty definitive on, not definitive, but that's a good indicator of more severe head injury than not, right? So I'm glad you brought that up. You hit your head, it's bleeding, and you lost consciousness. That's 911 emergency type stuff. You hit your head, you scratched it, it's bleeding a little bit, you feel fine, you're not dizzy, you're not seeing stars, your pupils and stuff look normal. Okay, maybe we still want to call and get help, but maybe not nearly as critical. Again, it's so hard for people to kind of triage that kind of stuff out there on the wall. So again, I would just say like call. We'll walk you through it on the phone and talk to you about the injuries and stuff like that. And we'll try to make the best assessment what we can and try to calm you down when we can, when we have service and stuff like that. But yes, I mean, as far as that's concerned, I think that's like some pretty good examples of kind of both ends of that spectrum. But yeah, the ones on the internal or the neck and spine injuries are the ones that really concern us, because those can be sleepers.
Fragile, and also like you really, really suspect for more damage by movement or paralysis or permanent damage moving forward. What do people do like in the immediate aftermath of an accident that typically makes things worse?
Move. And what I mean by that is we will get people that call in and say, I'm here. And we start sending everybody there. And oftentimes this is the ones that don't have cell service. People want cell service. So they'll call in 911. They'll say, here's my coordinates. I'm hurt. I need your help. Whether they're climbing, they're hiking, whatever. We get out there and they're nowhere to be found because they went hiking off somewhere else or descended or went to the top. And now we can't find them, but they're still injured. And they're out searching for more cell service and we can't find them. So like that's quite honestly the worst thing you can possibly do. If you call for help, we need you to stay right where you are when you call for help. Give us as much detail as if all you were able to do was get a 911 text out or pop a PLB, pop a Garmin. Stay in that spot because that's where we're coming. If you move from there and you slipped and fell and weren't able to give us another update on your location, we might never find you. And that's unfortunately the reality of it. We have lost people that we've gone out to look for and they weren't where they said they were, and we'll find them later several miles away. Or oftentimes what happens is somebody else finds them later, and unfortunately they've expired at that point. So if you're going to call for help, just stay where you are. That's the only way we're going to know how to find you.
On that note of stay where you are, also, if you write like an itinerary and you put it on your car, stick to that itinerary, or at least, follow it, or at least be like, okay, if we don't go here, this is our backup route, or this is our second backup route. So you at least have like, okay, if he's not here, he's here. If he's not here, he's here. Like, don't just do something that you haven't told anybody where you're going or what you're doing. Cause like, how is anybody supposed to find you?
Totally. And that's super common in Red Rock. People will like go up a climb way quicker than they thought. And they're like, dude, we still got several hours. Nobody's on this popular climb. Let's go do that one now too. You know what I mean? So if you told, your significant other or whomever at home that you were climbing, Prince of Darkness, but now you're way over on like, Dream of Wild Turkeys or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like we're going to immediately start looking for you where you said you were going to be. And if you've moved off of that, I mean, shoot. And the other big thing too is on that line too is give descriptions. Like write down what you're wearing. Kind of like to Dean's point in his podcast. Let us know what like clothes and stuff you're wearing, because Red Rock's popular. Like we go out there all the time and we're like, is that our party or is that our party? Which one of those is our party? Nobody's waving at us. All right, check the next one. You know what I mean? Because like it's so busy out there. And I hate to say it, but there's a lot of times where we go out to rescue people and people are truly hurt on the wall, and you'll see somebody on the route right next to them just climbing like nothing's going on. And maybe they don't know, and that's fine because it's big walls out there, but sometimes they do, but they're still doing their thing, or they have to keep moving because they're in the middle of a climb. So sometimes so descriptions and stuff like that, if you can get that kind of information, whether it's through leaving an itinerary or giving it when you call us, we're going to ask, but try to give as much of that as you can in case you lose the ability to communicate with us. It's just going to help expedite us getting to you. So,
do you want to walk us through what happened on Saturday a little bit? Now that we're kind of on this this kind of topic of more severe accidents, I think it's been on the tip of people's tongues. People are very interested in kind of what's going on. So I'd be interested to hear your perspective of the rescue.
Yeah, this one was a big one for sure. It's made, I think, national news at this point, actually. This was a full-on, what we would consider like level 1 lead climb rescue. So just to kind of break it down, so Saturday, just a couple of days ago at the time of this recording, we had a very experienced couple of climbers on a pretty stout climbing route out in Red Rock. So they were on a climb called Dream Safari, which there's been a lot of funny comments about this. They were on, technically, I think, starting the second pitch of Dream Safari, but people don't understand that that's an extension to another popular route called Risky Business over there on the Mescalito Formation. Okay, so kind of, I think another popular climb that people are very familiar with is Dark Shadows. So they were just climbers left of that. A very beautiful, blank, just patinaed wall. That route, depending on which guidebook or source you use, Mountain Project, whatever the case may be, does typically get an R rating. And this is another piece of advice I have for people. If it's wobbling between PG-13 and R, just go with R. Just assume that the route you're about to get on is R. And the victim on this story that we're talking about right now would definitely agree with you on that, because where he ended up falling, he was in the crux of that climb, of that extension. And it was an R-rated section. He had placed some pro. I talked with him. He's uncertain. We'll kind of get into his injuries and stuff in a little bit here. He's uncertain of exactly what happened, but he believes possibly like a foothold blew or just his foot blew, one of the two things. But he fell without even knowing he was going to fall. Somehow, and I'm not clear exactly, we did the best we could to try to figure out the how and the why in the limited time we had as we were rappelling down to him. At least one, possibly two pieces of his pro failed. It's thin protection in there. So he believed he had placed like a black totem, a small camming device. And prior to that, he had placed a small nut. The nut was still on the wall. It still had an alpine sling hanging from it, but it had no like rope side carabiner. So it was basically just a nut in a crack. It had a carabiner clip to the nut, which is, like for most climbers know, but like a passive piece of protection just kind of wedged in a crack, and then a long single length sling hanging there. But as I was approaching the victim, I noticed there was no carabiner hanging from it. So whether the carabiner failed, it somehow unclipped, alpine draws, it's difficult to back clip those, but it can still happen. But who knows? Any number of things could have happened, but just kind of the details of what I saw out there. So because of that, at least one, possibly two pieces of gear failing, we estimate probably fell at least 40 to 50 feet. When he fell, talking with his belayer, it sounds like I think his head took a majority of the initial impact of his fall when he swung back into the rock. It shattered his helmet. He was wearing a helmet, and I'll say right now, the only reason this man is still alive, or this person is still alive, is because he was wearing a climbing helmet. He's already kind of come public and stated who he is, but I'll leave his name and everything out of it. Very, like I said earlier, very experienced climber. I think that's the point that's worth driving home here too, is that this can absolutely happen to anybody. This wasn't some, inexperienced guy out there doing dumb stuff, making mistakes. Like, he knew what he was doing. He was climbing, but again, climbing is risky. So he fell, completely shattered his helmet, got two severe lacerations to the point where I could actually see his scalp on the top and side of his head. and also sustained some neck and back injuries during it. Initially, it was reported he potentially could have broken a leg as well. That was later determined that that did not happen. When he fell, he lost consciousness for his belayer believes for approximately a minute. And then his belayer, a very experienced climber, was able to lower him down back to him because he was less than, a half of rope length out. So he had plenty of rope to be able to get the climber back down to where he was belaying him from, which is a very small stance, a ledge approximately 1 foot, maybe 1.5 feet wide. The belayer got him down to the ledge, immediately took off his shirt and started applying direct pressure. As he was hanging there on the wall, he did bleed quite a bit from his head. I was kind of talking about earlier. Head injuries bleed a lot. This bled a lot. Like we got spun up around noon. I think it was called in at, I think he fell and 911 was called right at 11:50, and we were spun up immediately, level 1. I was very close to the hangar, so I immediately went to the hangar with another one of our officers. We quickly boarded the helicopter and started flying out. We were the first 2 to arrive in the area. And just to kind of give you some context, we were able to spot them immediately from a distance because of the amount of blood that he lost. It was quite apparent. It looked like somebody had painted the route because when he did lose consciousness after his fall, he did hang there for a second while his belayer kind of got things kind of figured out. And as he was lowering him, he kept bleeding down the wall as he came. So it was very easy to find them very quickly. They ended up being pretty much mid-face on this wall, which all told, you're well over 1,000 feet to the top of that formation, like well over 1,000 feet. We were able to find a ledge approximately 500 feet above them that we could safely insert our smaller helicopter. So there was 2 of us on that. We were able to insert at the top of that ledge. We call it one skidding, where we just kind of park one of the like skids or the 2 stances coming off the bottom of the helicopter. They'll just park one of those on the side, kind of position the helicopter in a way that we can climb out of it and get onto the ledge. Immediately, 2 of us started making access. So we just built a quick natural anchor on some boulders up there, started fixing some lines and started rappelling down. I always bring a massive med kit with me. I had one of our lead climb volunteers with us as well. So we always kind of entrust them with their rope access and their climbing experience to establish access for us because they can do it very quick. So our volunteer, he started just putting down a bunch of fixed ropes so we could get access as fast as possible. We had some amazing climbers on the wall that day, not the ones that were involved, but just all over that wall. There's some very popular routes. We had people allowing us to use their anchors that they had built just for access. There was 2 gals that were at the top of Dark Shadows Full, like towards the top. There's a nice big ledge up there. They had a beautiful anchor built up. We were able to just fire into that real quick to fix the line and get access down to them and then beef that anchor up for the rest of our party. So while we're making initial access, we've got the helicopter shuttling more people. We ended up bringing a total of 6 people onto the wall. 6. We brought 4 officers, 3 officers and our sergeant actually, and 1 volunteer on the wall. So that math doesn't math. That was 5. So we had 5 rescuers on the wall. And then we shuttled 3 more rescuers into the base later for receiving. So our volunteer and I accessed the patient immediately. As soon as I got to him, or as we were accessing to a local guide, again, I can't, talk about our climbing community enough. We've got some great people out here. There was a local guide that had a client on the climb below them, risky business. He was able to climb up to them, and he's, got some experience being a guide, as well as like wilderness first aid, first responder type stuff, where he was able to start, addressing some of the wounds, putting pressure on and getting the bleeding to stop in his head and then get the patient completely stabilized. So we had that happening as we were making access, which is just all certain things that just fell into place that really favored a good outcome for our victim on this one. Again, as I made contact with both of them, kind of got a story of what was happening, and then immediately started doing my medical assessment on the climber that fell. He was in a bad way. Like I said earlier, some lacerations on her head were immediately noticeable. Bleeding was controlled on those, which is a good thing. Like obviously massive hemorrhaging and stuff like that is one of the first things that can kill you. So we always look for that first. As I was doing my assessment of the rest of his body, it was very quickly apparent that he had some spinal trauma going on, specifically in his neck and in his lower spine. So, I don't know how much medical experience or how much, things like that you've had to do, but doing medical assessment, almost, 600 feet off the ground on the side of a cliff can be quite the dance. So we got him situated and stabilized as best that we possibly could. But like I said earlier, I could quickly tell he had no feeling in his left arm. He was unable to move his fingers. So it was quickly apparent that there was some neck injuries and potential spine injuries going on there. So as I'm stabilizing him, the rest of the rescue team is working on getting us. We have what's called a Stokes litter. The one that we have, or that we're all issued, we carry with us in our trucks, is made of titanium. So it's nice and light. It breaks into two pieces. So it allows us to be able to actually like rappel with it, fly it in with a helicopter and things like that. So the rest of the team, while I'm starting the medical care on our patient at this point, is starting to bring more ropes and bring all of the equipment we need to get him stabilized. I ended up making a C-collar for our victim and getting his spine as stable as possible with the assistance of the guide that I mentioned earlier and the belayer that was still there. As soon as they got that litter down to us, we were able to get him loaded into the litter. Meanwhile, our patient at that point, he absolute rock star. This gentleman is tough as nails. That's all I can say about him. As bad as he was, he had the best spirits. And ultimately, I think that's another good example of why the outcome was so good, because he wasn't panicking. He wasn't freaking out. He was an absolute rock star. As bad off as he was fully alert and oriented by the time I got to him, was able to answer all the questions and everything like that. Knew he was in a bad way. But you know what? He helped this be a successful rescue by being like the best patient as possible and staying calm. And I think you could, attribute that to a lot of his time and experience in the mountains and as being like as knowledgeable of a climber and just a mountain person as he was. So from there, these kind of rescues get very technical. At this point, we have to develop systems to where we can get him from that point, 600 feet off the ground, all the way down to the ground to where we can get him to a place where I can get him on a helicopter. I can't get him in a helicopter with our little helicopter like that on the side of a wall. We didn't have our hoist capability that day, so we were using our smaller helicopter. So we get him stabilized in the litter, and from there it's all technical rescue at that point. We have to build anchors, and obviously we don't bring 600-foot ropes with us. So we've got to figure out a way to get 600 feet with some ropes. So we have to make our way down the wall as safely as possible. And when we do that, we can't just send the victim or the patient down by themselves. So we've got to make sure it's always going to be a 2-person load. So since I had already started the medical care, I ended up being the rescuer that stayed with him. So I, without getting too specific in the details, I basically attach myself and himself to a 2-rope system, and then we start working on lowering. And then we kind of leapfrog rescuers down the wall to start building stations and then being able to set up with the 2 ropes so that we can continue to lower. So all in all, by the time we got him on the ground, time of call that they called him was 11:50. We were to him relatively quickly. Like I said, you were asking about timeframes earlier. We were to him within an hour. It took us a little while to get him stabilized just because of the situation. And I believe we finally touched down on the ground about 5 p.m. With that said, that's not where it stops, though, because anybody that's been on that wall knows it's a tight canyon in there. There's water. There's all sorts of concerns. I know everybody's like, "There's water in the desert." Yeah, that beautiful canyon has big pools at the bottom of these climbs. Yeah, they were full. So that's a big concern, right? We've got a patient that's windy, it's kind of chilly, it's in a shaded area. Like, I don't want to get this guy wet. So I've got to, there's a lot of technicality that went into play on this. Like, it was one heck of a rescue for sure. Thank goodness we had all the volunteers that we did. We actually called in one more lead climb volunteer and then 2 of our mountain rescue volunteers, one of which happens to be a doctor here in town. So as soon as I touched down on the ground, our patient literally had a doctor there waiting for him. Made a quick assessment, and once we got on the ground and had enough assets, about 5 of us, we had a couple more people come down from the wall as soon as I got our patient on the ground. We then had to carry him several hundred yards through that canyon, which is, full of foliage, like all the scrub oak bushes, tons of boulders, some creek crossings. So we had to carefully carry him to a place where was big enough for us to be able to get we use an MD 530. It's a small little helicopter, as one of our rescue ships, a big enough area where he could get that in and land one of those skids on a rock so that I could get in and then we could load that litter in, and I was in there to receive him. By the time we did that, I think we were like right around 5:30, as it was like dusk was, the daylight was starting to end, which can make things a little bit more spicy. And then from there, we flew him. There's a fire station out in Red Rock. That's typically a staging area that we use, where we always already had medical assets waiting. So we were able to get him flown to that station, where I transferred him over to an ambulance crew that was waiting, helped them with getting him transferred into their litter. And then they took him off to UMC trauma. And I think he finally got there, probably, I don't know, somewhere between 6 and 7 by the time he got to the hospital in good care. I've actually spoken with him a few times, checking with him daily. He's doing well. He did suffer 3 breaks in his neck, a contusion on his spinal cord, but he'll recover, And a lot of that has to do with the big team effort, with his mental fortitude, with his belayers preparedness and his knowledge of being able to do some self-rescue, because it wasn't as simple as I made it sound of just, he lowered him back down. There was some shenanigans that had to happen for his belayer to get, his injured buddy that's bleeding all over the wall back to him. So it was, for such a terrible situation, I think it had the best possible outcome because of all of the circumstances that were involved, and everybody everybody from the climbers that were on the route next to us, helping us out, all the way to the guide that came up and assisted, to all the SAR personnel and to the pilots, definitely saved this man's life. He would agree. So it was pretty epic. And unfortunately, we were kind of on that subject of more severe type rescues and these level 1s. Unfortunately, these happen quite a bit. We have had these quite often. And it's just part of climbing, unfortunately. So
how many times a year would you say something this severe happens?
I would, yeah, I mean, something this severe, I would say at least once or twice a year. Typically, I'd say it's safe to say at least once a year we're going to have one where we have a patient that we would consider a true level 1 on a climbing route. This was definitely one of the more severe, not the most severe. We'll get into the next subject in a second. But this was a bad one. This was, all of the factors on this, the size of the climb, where he was, they all made it a very challenging one. And I couldn't be more proud of our team and our pilots and our volunteers, and for being able to be out there and make this a success, because it's a task. It's so many moving parts. It's such a technical type rescue that requires so much skill, and everybody
on the walls at risk.
Totally. And everybody performed. Everybody was clutch in the moment and just made it happen. And it was a beautiful thing to see happen, for sure. Yeah.
A couple of follow-up questions. What ended up arresting his fall?
He had a bomber piece placed below that nut. I can't recall exactly what it was, but he had multiple pieces placed before the one that failed. So it was the piece below the nut that I told you that I saw.
That was just kind of randomly sitting there without any sort of sign that it was even attached to the rope in the first place.
Correct. Yeah. And talking with him on the way down the wall, because we definitely had some time to chat, I'm a big fan of patient advocacy and keeping my patients super comfortable and telling stories and chatting and just keeping them occupied. But that was a lot of the questions we had, was trying to figure out what happened. And unfortunately, the best that he can recall is he knows he clipped that. He has no idea how it came unclipped. And again, this is an experienced climber. Not saying he made a mistake. It could have been a freak accident. I mean, we don't place locking carabiners on every piece of pro. That's just not part of the game.
I think that's the whole thing that this accident brings up, is just we can try to mitigate the risk as much as possible, but after a certain amount of time, chaos comes for us all.
For sure. Murphy's Law, right?
Yeah. And did the black totem fail? Did it pull out of the wall?
So undetermined on that. If it had, it would have been on his rope near his harness, right? Like it would have been with him. You have to understand too, when we've got, at that point, there was 6 of us at an anchor. There's a lot of ropes. There's a lot of gear. There's a lot of equipment. It's so hard to tell. There was a black totem at the anchor, but it was like clipped to a harness at that point. So unknown if it got removed. Speaking with the Blair, he doesn't remember removing it. So unknown. Where the black totem came into play was just speaking with the patient as I was coming down the wall with him. I was just trying to talk with him. He's like, yeah, I remember placing that nut. I remember clipping the sling and everything like that. And then I believe I placed a really good black totem after that. And everybody knows like black totem, like when it's placed good, like that's a magical little piece, right? But it wasn't there. I mean, it was still there. We found it. I don't know.
No signs of damage to it at all.
Correct. Yeah. It was totally intact. And unknown where the carabiner that was on that wasn't recovered. So you would have think that would have been on the rope either.
Because I've heard of stuff unclipping from the rope, but also unclipping from the alpine draw and then just falling off the wall.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It is wild. And we can only speculate, right? Because unfortunately he did, lose consciousness, sustain a head injury. So he probably wasn't in like, and it was a big day. So it was hard for him to recall exactly what happened. But, after talking with him and knowing him, like this isn't somebody that's, inexperienced, just out there doing wild stuff. So yeah, but again, like I can't stress it enough. Like know this when you're going climbing. Stuff can happen. It is dangerous. Like people die doing this sport. Like it's kind of some of the allure to it, right? We love climbing because it's spicy, because it gives us that adventurous feeling of like, well, I'm doing something I shouldn't be. I'm defying gravity.
To me, I think it's the fact that we're doing something that has such understandable consequence. Like how often can you be in a moment like that where your decisions matter so much? I think that's rare.
It's a constant game of risk management, right? It's like you're constantly.
It's so close to like some sense of truth, like where and meaning. Like your decisions matter
For sure.
Every decision you make matters.
100%.
It's not like you can just wander around the world just kind of like making mistakes or oh well, I guess I didn't do that. It's like no, like everything matters. Everything has meaning. And that's why I love it so much.
Me too. I'm right there with you. It's like, that's why it's probably one of my, it is my biggest passion is for that. Like one of those, that reason right there is the mental challenge of it. It doesn't matter how hard the climb is that you're on. Like it's all about like, there's so many books on this and stuff too. I can talk about like the Rock Warriors way and all this stuff, but it's like, it's the mental games you're playing up there and like just keeping yourself controlled when in these just crazy environments, so
yeah, it's wild. But yeah, like I said, I guess I'm repeating myself, but yeah, the whole element of chaos. It's like I think people like mountaineers and alpinists deal with this a lot more than I think rock climbers do, where it's like you have the mountain chaos, you've got avalanches, you have crevasses, you have randomness that is, I think the dial of randomness is turned up a little bit. Rock climbing can seem pretty sterile when it comes to like comparison to other mountain sports. But this example is just like such a stark reminder that yeah, even trad climbing, like randomness is there waiting for you.
For sure. Yeah. There's so many variables.
Anything else about, so the victim is like out of your hands. The 7-hour rescue is done. Like what happens to your team's mind? Like, how are you guys decompressing? Like, it's gotta be like a moment, I would imagine.
I'm glad you asked that. So a huge part of any rescue is the debrief, right? That's our moment to decompress. That's our moment to talk about what happened, the good and the bad, right? Because every one of these rescues is a learning opportunity as well. Like, how could we have been more efficient? What are some little things we could have done a little bit better? Everything from patient care to the rope systems that we use to how we access them to, any sorts of variables that we could have done. So that's a big thing that we do after every one of these is nobody goes home. We collect all of our gear. We get all that sorted. And then we sit and we talk. We stand and everybody like goes through what they did in this scenario, what they could have done better, what they feel like they did great, and then overall what went well, right? And then a big thing for me, it kind of goes back to that patient advocacy part, is like you almost build like a little bit of a relationship. Like you spend 5 hours hanging out with somebody that's severely injured and in a bad way. Like you kind of you get to know them and you start caring. You care for your patients. So for me, like the aftermath for me is all about like I like to reach out. I like to see how they're doing. I like to check in. I want to know. I truly do. You know what I mean? Like that's important to me because we provided them a service and I want to make sure that we did the best that we could. And then it helps us too as rescuers to know that they're okay. You know what I mean? Like that we were able to get them out of that really bad situation and get them help and then make sure that they're safe after that. And then the first thing I do is I share that with the teammates too, because that's the kind of stuff that's the reason everybody does this is to help people. So when they get that feedback that, to see somebody that's grateful for our service, like that's why our volunteers do what they do, is like to know that they succeeded in that. That's huge, right? So that's all part of that aftermath. Like how we wind down is that debrief and then just kind of chatting about it and um
Yeah, I've heard people recommend a debrief for clients, even if nothing goes wrong. Like, get back at the end of the day and you're sitting at the car drinking your Gatorade or whatever. Like, do the same thing. Hey, what with your partner? What went well? What didn't? What could we have done better today? Where did we push it a little too close? How can we be more efficient? X, Y, Z.
Yeah, if you're not doing that, like you're wrong. Like it's so beneficial to do that. No, I'm serious, right?
No,
Like
I love that.
especially like maybe not sport climbing. You know what I mean? Like that's a different thing. I think you could probably avoid a sport climb, like because you're pretty engaged. You and your Blair are commuting the whole time, and you're projecting, you're doing whatever, and you're just having fun. But when you're starting to get into like these bigger objectives and multi-pitch stuff, whether it's big multi-pitch sport or big trad like adventure routes and stuff, debriefs are amazing, right? Especially when you throw in variables like you wrapped the route as well, or you walked off and that didn't go so well. Like, how could we have done that better? Could we have researched it better, drawn out a map? Yeah, debriefs are huge. I mean, you don't, hockey players and football players like the Golden Knights and the Raiders are going to sit down and have a debrief after their game. They are. They're not just going home and high-fiving in the locker room. They're going to sit down. They're going to talk about how could we have done this better? You know what I mean? And that's how you just get better and safer as a climber too. So absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, it's important. It's a level of self-awareness. It's important too. It's like asking those questions in the first place.
Yeah, maybe that was a little harsh to say. If you're not debriefing, you're wrong. But like, I just like, tell me a reason not to. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like, there's no harm in it for sure. Like, there's tons of benefits. So.
Before we get back to it, if you've been listening to the show, you probably know how much time and effort and love I put into this project. The research, the conversations, the production, the editing, all of it. And while it might seem like I've got a team of people on this project, I don't. It's just me. And even with sponsors, I spend a large amount of my own personal money on this project simply because I love it. If you're a listener that's looking for a way to give back to this show in a meaningful way, please become a Patreon subscriber. Once you become a supporting member of the Climbing Majority, not only will you feel really good about yourself, but you'll also get access to the ad-free version of the show and exclusive content. If this speaks to you, click the link in the description or go to patreon.com/theclimbingmajoritypodcast to become a supporting member of the show today. So to me, there's like body recoveries, and then there's something happened where we didn't make it in time, and a death was a result of something. Do you have any like stories of maybe the latter first, like where it's maybe like a rescue could have been, but it ended up turning into a body recovery?
I'm trying to think if I have a example of that per se. I can think of one where we did a recovery as a team. I wasn't on it, but our team did a recovery, and the person ended up dying later from the injuries. I don't know. Actually, I know for a fact that in that circumstances, due to the injuries, the time of our rescue had no effect on that. It was the severity of their injuries were just ended up being unsurvivable. Um, I can't think of any time. I take that back. I can think of one, and it wasn't a climbing one. It was a hiker, and it was in Red Rock, and I can't remember exactly what canyon again. It was a couple years ago. We had a hiker that was up there during the snow, actually, when there was snowstorm. I think this was probably 2022. A lot of snow, especially in the upper elevations out there. And the gentleman had climbed up there in not the best apparel. He was wearing, like, I believe, cowboy boots, had, some food and water and things like that. Young, fit guy had hiked up into the upper parts of Red Rock into where the snow had started to get actually pretty deep up there. And he was still kind of scrambling around in some like the sandstone areas that were covered in snow, which had started to kind of turn into like kind of like a thin layer of ice. He got proper stuck up there, and he, from what I recall from getting the briefing on this, he called in 911 and asked for assistance. The cloud layer and stuff like that was just far too low. Could not get to him versus, via helicopter. And he was told to stay in place, which is a hard thing to do when you're not prepared and night's setting in. He ended up moving down the snow field that he was on, kind of closer to the sandstone, and then ended up slipping and falling on some ice and took a very big, nasty fall that ended up being fatal. The team was able to go out the following day and went back to the coordinates that he was last at. However, like I said, he had moved down the mountain to try to get out of the snow from those and had fallen to his death, unfortunately, and they were able to find his body kind of below the last point of contact. So that's one of those situations where, unfortunately it wasn't even safe. It was at night due to all the ice and everything like that too. Like it was almost even impossible to access him via foot. So that was one of those ones where it was like, man, if we were able to get to him, could we have saved him as a team? Unfortunately, we weren't. Like we just simply, there's just some times where, it's not worth risking, the helicopter and the lives of everybody involved as far as rescuers and stuff like that, and having multiple casualties. If it's not safe, like we simply just sometimes can't access people. And unfortunately in that one, again, it was a hiker, he unfortunately expired due to those circumstances.
What's the issue with cloud cover and helicopters? Is it line of sight and obstacles?
Absolutely.
There's no LiDAR. You can't
Yeah, so you have to understand that when our pilots are trying to get officers, human beings, or volunteers inserted into an area, it's typically not in like a big wide open flat area. If that's the case, no big deal. They're trying to do it in these tight canyons and stuff like that. So if they can't see, they can't fly into the canyons because the canyons are so tight. Yeah, is there probably some technologies? Again, I can't really speak to that. I'm not a pilot. But a lot of what they do is line of sight, especially when it gets into the very technical flying where they're getting into these tight canyons and getting us as close to the injured parties as possible. They have to have vision for that, simply put. And then a lot of the times too, with cloud cover and when it's snowing and stuff like that, there's wind. And wind is just an unruly factor when it comes to trying to position a helicopter in a very specific location. It's almost impossible. So like our pilots simply cannot do that. They can't fly into these tight canyons when they can't see, and they're getting pushed all over the place by Mother Nature. So
I saw you guys flying Sunday. I was over in on Magic Mountain, and you guys were flying in and out of Pine Creek.
Was that later in the afternoon?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it looked like you guys were doing training.
No, that was the 2 rescues that we did yesterday, actually. So today being Tuesday, yesterday we did 2 rescues, one on Crimson and then one over on Mr. Z. On Sunday evening, late in the afternoon and the evening, they hiked. What time was it on Sunday?
Like 1 p.m.
Oh, okay, that was me.
1 p.m.
Yeah, so that was us flying into back into the dark shadows to recover our gear. So we had to leave a bunch of gear in there. So we went in the morning, flew in, and got dropped off at the same spot, and I wrapped down because we ended up leaving like a fixed anchor down there with a bunch of like trad pieces.
It was windy as hell that day.
Later in that day, where I was going with this,
like watching the helicopter fly around, I was like, I was getting blown off the route. I was like, that is insane.
See, that wasn't too bad. And the wind can be deceiving, like out in certain canyons, it can be way different than in other canyons. So our pilots will try. So where I was going with that is later in that day, we did have two parties climb in, the one on Crimson Chrysalis that said their rope was stuck, and then we had the party on Mr. Z over near Brownstone Wall, right, on the Jackrabbit Buttress that were off route and stuck. That started on Sunday evening. We flew the helicopter in with rescuers, but were unable to get to them because the winds were so bad at that point. They couldn't safely land anywhere. So unfortunately, the decision was made and both parties were prepared for it. They had to stay the night. And then yesterday morning at 4 a.m., we started hiking in and then climbed up to get them. So there's definitely times where Mother Nature plays a huge factor in this, right? So, and we're always at her like beck and call. So
What about, let's talk about Community Pillar.
okay.
Yeah, let's, because that one I think is still pretty fresh in everybody's minds. That was last year, right?
Should have been 2024 because we're early in 2026 now. So I think it was later in 2024. Yep. So a little over a year ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Just tell me that story from your perspective.
Yeah. Again, another rescue that our team did. I wasn't on that one. A couple of our other partners, a couple of my teammates and our volunteers were on that one. Read the full debrief, talked with all the individuals involved because we do that. Even if we're not on a rescue, we all debrief it. We all learn from rescues as a team. So when it came to Community Pillar, what's interesting about that is we had actually had a rescue already going on Cat in the Hat. So just across the canyon from it, we had just some stuck climbers that were unable to get down. So we had a couple volunteers and some officers that were already out there doing a rescue. And one of our volunteers actually made a statement. They're like, "Hey, I just heard what I think is a person scream and fall and land hard on the ground. It sounded like a body had fallen." And then almost within, seconds of that, within minutes actually, because there's a relay that happens, 911 gets called, and then the information gets sent to us that yes, we did just have an individual that fell. Most likely, it was reported to their death on Community Pillar. So another rescue team was spun up. So another officer and a couple more volunteers were sent over there. Were flown into Community Pillar, and they were able to climb up and access the person that reported it, which was the climbing partner of the person that was pretty quickly determined to be deceased. So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about when we were talking about rappelling earlier. There was a lot of misinformation that came out about that particular incident. And then, this being a small world that the climbing community is, I actually rescued a couple people off of Crimson, probably 6 months after the Community Pillar incident, which I'll get back to in a second. Ironically, that were stuck, from rappelling on Crimson. That were friends with both involved parties. So I was able to get kind of their perspective of it too. They were climbers from like the Southern California area. And these two individuals from the Community Pillar incident were, well-known climbers in that area. And there was a lot of misinformation out there about it and stuff too. But at the end of the day, what ended up occurring is that the first person rappelled down. I can't state specifically, I don't remember what technique the first person rappelled with, but what I do know is that they rappelled down first, got to the bottom of that rappel. The second individual set themselves up. They were using a double rope, they were using a single climbing rope, and they had it halved, like we often do in climbing. But the second climber opted to use a beaner block technique and load a gree to just rappel on one of the lines. Unfortunately, she didn't have a buddy check. This was kind of what I was talking about earlier, as far as, both parties should set themselves up on rappel. You can rappel off of somebody that's already loaded. You should do that. That's best practice. We talked about earlier, rappelling is can be the most dangerous part of climbing in some cases, and this is a good example of that. So they were on a ledge. The individual loaded themselves onto the rappel into their gree, which is a single rope, belay and technically rappelling device if you know how to use it correctly. And unfortunately, they loaded on the wrong side. So if you're not familiar with a knot block, basically you're using a knot and a carabiner on one side to stop the rope from getting pulled through, and then you load your device on the other side, preferably, for it to work successfully, and then you'll be pulling against that knot into the anchor, and then when you get at the bottom, you can pull on the knot side and retrieve your rope. Unfortunately, though, she was standing on a ledge, loaded on the wrong side, so on the knot side. It was also dark, and as she approached the edge, as soon as she loaded it and started weighting the rope on the edge, the rope just took off, and she, fell with zero resistance to her death. So, yeah, I mean, super tragic. It's very easy to say it after the fact, but it could have been avoided. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier is I don't understand why people don't want to do safety checks. It's almost like people are embarrassed or there's like a stigma about it. But I mean, I've been doing it since day one and I still make every person I climb with do it. I check each other's harnesses. I go through the old school language of, on belay, belay is on, climbing, climb on. You know what I mean? And then when we're rappelling, we do the same thing. Each and every time we take off on a pitch, we're checking, hey, do you have all the gear you need? You know what I mean? Like, it takes seconds to do these things, and it can literally mean like the difference between life or death, And I just can't stress that enough. I mean, and that's just as the climber in me that just cares about humans, is just take the second to double check each other. There's really no reason not to. You know what I mean?
At least for me in that specific example, the biggest thing to take away was just like test your new system before you take off your backup. Like ideally you're clipped in with a PAS
100%
to the anchor.
Yeah.
And load your rappel so that your PAS has got slack before you take it off. If that is practiced, you won't make that mistake.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's quite simply like, that's the best practice, right? And even if you don't climb with a dedicated PAS, like you should have some
alpine
slings,
sling,
100%.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
Girth a quick alpine sling, have
I
yourself
don't care
a
how
way of
huge the
connecting.
ledge is.
Yep. And then use some sort of backup. Why not? You know what I mean? There's so many, like a little piece of hollow block, or, you know what I mean? There's so many different things that you can do out there to back up an ATC or some sort of rappel device, And then if you're going to use a knot block, I'm not saying don't do it. It's a valid technique and stuff like that. But that's one of those ones that definitely should be double checked with a partner and should be weight tested before it goes.
Weight tested. Don't do it for the first time by yourself on a multi-pitch. Don't like try new systems where consequences are high, like it's dark. I also am a huge proponent of bringing an ATC with you regardless. I always I simul wrap with grease with my partner. Like that's how we rappel. Obviously not every circumstance, but that's pretty much what we do, especially out here in Red Rock with all the bolted anchors. But we both always have ATCs with us because you never know if simul wrapping isn't an option. And I don't want to be forced in a situation where the only way for me to get down is by using a wrap shear method or a knot block where it's not actually advantageous, or like, who knows what else. Like you need to be prepared. And it's like, what does that extra piece of gear weigh or take up space? Nothing.
Yeah, and I mean that's almost like a good segue into like another thing, and maybe we're going to talk about this later too, but having other options, like you should have more than one device to go, down a rope. You should also be able to go up a rope and have the knowledge on how to do that. And that doesn't need to, you don't need to bring handle descenders and stuff like that, but there's so many little things out there. Like I always have a micro traction on my harness. I always have like a little tib lock on my harness. A little bit of cordelette, a little hollow block. There's, a sling. You can use a sling as an ascender. Like there's so many things out there, but where I'm going with that is it's so important that we as climbers, if you're going to venture into the multi-pitch world, you need to know how to do things other than climb and rappel. Have a plan for, self-rescue. Have a plan for partner rescue if your lead climber falls. Have a plan if you're the lead climber and your belayer has a heart attack. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do? Like, how do you get down to him? Like, have plans for these kind of things. And there's a ton of resources. We're in this digital age now where you can figure out anything. There's so many good YouTubers. I'm not saying that's the way. I would highly recommend people to reach out and get some training. There's so many different, resources out there for good education. But also know little things like no more knots than a clove hitch and a figure eight. Like a munter hitch can do so much for us in this big, trad like multi-pitch world. If you drop your ATC, you can still get down. There's ways of doing this. And it surprises me a lot when we come across climbers, that when we're out there just climbing on my own recreationally, or people that we're rescuing and stuff like that, that don't possess this knowledge. And I'm not saying that, they're like shame on them or anything, but we as climbers need to do a better job of pushing education, because I think it would just keep things a lot safer for us and get us out of some of these situations. You know what I mean? So
The idea of a climbing gym in Vegas, like a big one, I think has been kind of contested, or at least political in a way. Um, do you feel like a gym would be a net positive for the climbing community here in Vegas, or do you feel like it would be too much of a like trampoline for people to like get into the sport of climbing and be like, I'm going out to Red Rock because the access is so easy? Like, do you see more accidents and more ill education happening because of a gym like that, or do you think it would be better?
so it's funny that you bring this up. And now this is Jared talking and not like search and rescue, right? This is just Jared the climber talking. There's rumors that there's
Oh, it's coming.
yeah, there's a big climbing gym coming, right? And I'm loyal. Like, I will always be loyal to like Red Rock Climbing Center. I'll throw it out there. Those are my like friends that own it. My son works there. Like, that's my home, and it always will be. But if you're not excited as a climber that one of these mega gyms is coming, if you've never been to one, like we go to Salt Lake City a lot and get a climb in those, like where the US climbing team climbs, it's unreal.
I came from San Diego and I was depressed when I came to Vegas and found out there was no huge gym.
So it's funny that you say that you're depressed. I actually kind of love the climbing gym scene here because it's full of climbers. You know what I mean? Yeah, they still get like visitors and the birthday parties and things like that. So to your point, do I think a mega gym coming here will increase the incidents that we have out in Red Rock? Absolutely. Yeah. But and I'm not saying that in a negative way. And I again, I'll repeat this. I'm excited for us to have a mega gym. Like, I will always have my membership to my local gym that I love, but I will definitely go check out the mega gym and climb on some, fun futuristic climbing gym holds and stuff like that. But what those places do is they provide a very fun experience for just the average citizen to entice them to come in and try climbing. Going to some of these smaller gyms can be very intimidating for other people, and they're like, oh, but now you have this big one that also has like a weight room and all this, showers and stuff like that. And yeah, totally. Right. Like, it's an experience. So yeah, is it going to get more people, the 2 million plus people that we have in Las Vegas? Is it going to expose a lot more people to climbing? For sure. Do I think that starting your climbing career in a climbing gym is bad? No, I think that's the path for most people. All I will ask and hope, and I hope this message gets put out there, that if people decide to take it outside, that they do it the right way. They find mentors, they get educated. I hope that, and I know like some of the local gyms do a good job of this, of talking to people and trying to encourage them to, seek training and know what they're doing. But climbing outside is night and day different. And we all know this as climbers, but the variables are just so much more uncontrollable, and it's just such a different world. You know what I mean?
And I think Red Rock is particularly prone to these kind of accidents just because you had mentioned like moderate, long, huge, involved climbs that are technically easy. And so, you climb in a gym and you're like, oh man, I climbed 510. I crushed. I just red pointed my 510. And so you go out and you're like, I'm going to try trad climbing, or I'm going to try whatever. And you're like, oh, 5.6 or 5.7 should be super easy. I mean, recipe for disaster real quick.
Yeah. It's very rare for us to do like a rescue on like the Rainbow Wall, or, you know what I mean? It's very rare. It's like you said, it's a lot of that. People underestimate Red Rock all the time. And that's where I think that exposing a lot more people to climbing, which I think is awesome. I think, like I love sharing this with people. I don't necessarily love like the big lines on some of the climbs sometimes, but I think that that will, unfortunately be somewhat of a byproduct of, a big gym like that. But yeah, people get on these routes and they're like, oh yeah, 5'7", no big deal. And it's epic. And it's epinephrine and 5'9". That one gets more people than, I mean, to the point where, it is a couple years ago, like the team actually put a cash box up there with like, some puffy jackets and like extra water and food and gloves.
How'd you get the
and
cooler
stuff
up there?
like that. The helicopter. Yeah. Yeah. We're not hiking that up there. Come on. We have a hoist capability, but we need to get up there and restock that because I know it's been pillaged. And
How often is it restocked?
that's a good question. We try to get to it regularly. It needs to be restocked.
And
I'll just say that.
how can I trust the fluids in there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
I remember going up there once and opening it, and I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, the stuff that's
Like,
getting
some
put
of
up
it's
there
like
is like sealed and stuff.
half
So if it's
drunken
not
or-
sealed,
okay.
I mean, if somebody swapped fluids in a container, I can't speak to that. But the stuff that we put in there is, I mean, by all means, it's going to be in there for, a season if nobody uses it, and then we'll go up and replace it. But it's just little things like that because there's a reason that box is up there. That's a 5'9". Like that's in most people's wheelhouse. But it's a 5'9" chimney that's epically long and then has this just wild descent that can just sneak up and get you. You know what I mean? And so it has caused a lot of rescues, which is why there's a big cache on it. And that's a perfect example of that is you get people who are like, oh, 5'11" in the gym's easy. I can easily go out and climb this. And you're like, there's nothing in the gym that's like epinephrine. Nothing.
I mean, I've been climbing for almost 12 years now, and like I just did a hard sport day on Saturday, and then we did like a hard trad day on Sunday. Two completely different sports.
Totally.
Completely different sports. Like the movement is completely different. Like the amount of three-dimensional awareness you have to have with your body to be able to pull off some of these even on easy trad climbs, you're like stemming like crazy. Like you're not finding that on a sport climb. It's like just because you can climb 5'10", 5'11" sport, like some of it doesn't even transfer. It's like the movement is completely different.
Yeah, I mean, you said it the best. They're two completely different things. Like if I'm out, with my son projecting something, like it's much harder than what I'm gonna go out and quote unquote project on trad. Like I'm typically not projecting trad routes. Like there is some fun little like one pitch climbs that are like, okay, let's rehearse this on top road, figure out the gear, and then let's see if we can get this like, cool, whatever. But yeah, it's a totally different thing, right? And like that sometimes does not get communicated in the gyms. You know what I mean? Like, cause the gym is a sport climbing world, and then you get out there and you're like, oh, I can do that. Like, yeah, it's wild. The rescue we had yesterday, unfortunately younger, inexperienced climbers, and the gear that we did get to see of theirs, I'll be honest with you, would not have held a fall. And like,
Oof. Which route was this?
Well, so this was Mr. Z, which is again another one of these moderate climbs. 5'7" moderate climb, beautiful big line, but they got completely off route and in unknown territory with just chossy, broken rock, and it was pretty heinous. And placed some gear, and the leader ended up getting to a point where he couldn't find any more place to put anything, and now he's stuck. And his belayer, literally, when I got to him, told me, because I asked him why he didn't put his approach shoes on and get himself more comfortable, and he's like, I was afraid the anchor was gonna fail, so I just leaned against the rock all night, and I wanted my climbing shoes on so I didn't slip. And he, I think the anchor was, I'd give it a 5 out of 10. Yeah, but there was definitely pieces on that wall that would not have held a fall. And this is not a knock on those individuals at all, but it's just a testament to, we get a lot of people that just go outside and just try to figure it out on their own. And when it comes to sport climbing, sometimes you can get away with that, especially nowadays with everything having like mussies or pigtails or whatever at the top, where it's just super simple, right? Like we've made it pretty safe to climb. But trad is not that. Placing gear is an art, and you got to know how to do it. And there's so much like, minutia that comes into it.
Red
And
Rock is kind of tricky with gear
super
too.
tricky.
Yeah, it's not straightforward. I had someone come down from Canada and was like on a 5.7. It's like, I don't know how to protect this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can do some cool stuff here, like, wrapping things around like chicken heads and natural features, but like there's sometimes you have to do that because the crack's so flared out or so sandy that you're like, dude, there's no cam's going to hold me here. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a good place to learn if you have someone to teach you. And that's what I just stress that enough. I can't stress that enough. Like if you're interested in getting into trad climbing, heck yeah. Like I support you. That's my favorite, but don't do it on your own. Like find somebody that's a mentor. You got to have a mentor. Like we all had a mentor to learn this. If you didn't, then you got lucky. Let's be honest.
I think people are having a hard time finding mentors these days. I think like we're coming to this problem where there's too many climbers and not enough mentors.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think that also comes into personality too. Climbing gyms are great places to meet people. I mean, here locally, and I'm not, supporting like Facebook or anything like that, but we've got a Vegas climbers group, and there is always people posting on that group. We monitor it all the time because people post rescues on there sometimes. Like, hey, I'm stuck on this route and I need help. Like that happens, and we'll see it. Or like a friend will send it to me and be like, hey, did you see this? And I'm like, oh, is this happening right now? Yeah. I mean, seriously, it happens. But anyways, I mean, if you're interested in getting onto that, reach out to the local climbing gyms, go on these Facebook groups, because there's literally always people on there looking for climbing partners, and they'll put on there how much experience they have. And then you can get to chat with people and determine relatively quickly if, they have as much experience as they do. I mean, there's always going to be a gamble, right? But I feel like somebody that, has some experience is going to be a little better than you just trying to figure it out on your own. But, it's a risky thing to, find new climbing partners sometimes too. Sometimes it pays off, and other times it's like, whoa, never mind. Like we're not doing that again.
Yeah. Blacklisted.
So yeah, but
yeah, it's a tough one. And we've spoken at length on this podcast about like mentors and how to approach that and like questions to ask. And I think the biggest thing is like, if you're trying to find someone to teach you something, try to bring something to the table. Like, and also don't just like, hey, bring me up this. It's like, hey, I have this goal in mind. I really want to do it. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't. Like, yeah, just being straightforward about what you can bring to the table. And even if it's like, even if you're the one that's like, hey, I really just want to follow you up this, I'll buy you a 6-pack of beer afterward, or, whatever your offer is. Like there's something you can always do. But I think some people might go into it where it's just like, a lot of ask and not a lot of return. It's like, yeah, try to find what you can provide.
Yeah, I just got lucky, in life. Like just my climbing coach was my mentor. I learned from a very early age, and then I've made some just amazing relationships here in Vegas, years ago when I first moved here. And honestly, like my best climbing partner I met like literally on a mountain project forum post, like, hey, looking for a climbing, like this back in the day before, I don't want to date myself that much, but it was a long time ago. And it was, like, hey, looking for some climbing partners. And, we started with just like, hey, let's go out and do some casual sport climbing and stuff and feel each other out. And the next thing you know, like we were ticking off every climb out in Red Rock in like just a fury, and just, we meshed so well. And I learned so much from him. And like you said, bringing something to the table, I was able to offer, things to him and stuff too. And yeah, and then you got to find a new mentor when you want to get into the big wall stuff. You know what I mean? Like it never stops. So like never stop learning. I think that's the biggest thing too. Never think you know everything, because that's one thing I love about being like on the search and rescue team is we have the luxury of getting to go to so many different schools and meeting so many different people that are collectively like gathering all of this like modern information and techniques. And so you're just constantly just getting better and improving, And like you don't have to be on a search and rescue team to do that. You can do that in your community. You can go and get classes. You could go and try to be a guide. Like, I have a buddy that's going through the AMGA school right now. He's actually one of our teammates, and he's going to learn a ton doing that. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, speaking to a lot of guides recently too, and there's a lot of people offering like very curated classes, like introduction to trad or advanced trad techniques. Like these are simple classes you could take. You don't have to go spend 10 grand to get your AMGA guide certification. Like you could literally go spend $400 and like get a wealth of knowledge all in a single day. that you couldn't get anywhere else, or it would take a lot more time or luck to find someone that's willing to give you that information in such a condensed, focused manner. But yeah, I think there's a lot of resources out there that people aren't aware of or that are underutilized.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a great thing. I think that's cool that more guides are starting to do that too, right? Because there's definitely a market for it now. And that's exactly what I was talking about. There's guides in pretty much every area of this country that you can reach out to do that. So, especially here in Vegas, there's a ton. So,
Yeah, if I were to go back and talk to myself like in the beginning, I would be like, dude, you like go get a little bit more knowledge, you know. I definitely was more of the trial by fire kind of person, and I survived. That's the only reason why I'm sitting here. It was luck. Talking like circling back a little bit towards kind of the heavier stuff, I guess. You know, we talked about like a civilian casualty, but you've been either a part of or your department has had some actual SAR officer deaths.
yeah.
Maybe bring one of those stories to light. And yeah, I think it's just important to talk. You know, we talk about how, you know, I joked about the helicopter being like the most dangerous thing, but I think it's easy to forget just how much danger you guys actually put yourselves in. So I just want to paint that picture a little bit.
Yeah. Unfortunately, our team has lost 2 of our officers over the years. We had one in the late 90s. I didn't know him. His name was Russell. I did not know him. He was before my time, but he was just a phenomenal human being. Had been on the search and rescue team for quite a long time. And then him and another one of our officers were actually up climbing the Vegas hose monster, which for, you know, listeners or viewers that don't know, it's actually an ice climb here in Las Vegas. It's up in the Mount Charleston area. It comes in rarely. It's kind of like the unicorn ice climb around
Yeah, I've been
here.
waiting for it.
Yeah, I've tried to climb that thing so many times. But yeah, unfortunately, they were up there training because we actually do quite a bit of alpine rescue here with Mount Charleston. You know, being almost 12,000 feet, it gets pretty snowy and alpiney up there. So they were doing some training on that, and unfortunately, it did collapse and crush our officer. So he unfortunately died during that training accident. More recent and even closer to home, especially for all of us that are still on the team, was Officer Dave Van Buskirk, who was our search and rescue officer. We all have different call signs, and his at the time was SR3, which is Search and Rescue 3, and it's just kind of designates your seniority in the unit. That one's since been retired, and in fact, one of Dave's friends actually started a training company, you know, after the fact, with that as being like the name of the company, just, you know, it's kind of a tribute to him. But Dave was he was the best, and his was a very tragic accident. It actually occurred in the middle of a rescue. You know, posthumously, he was awarded a life-saving award for that rescue. There was a lost and injured hiker that was stranded up near the Mount Charleston area, and they inserted Dave. This was an older helicopter platform that we had with an older hoist type system that was on it. They used a different technique back then. You know, unfortunately, his accident was actually a catalyst for a lot of change. But the long story short is that he was inserted, and as he was rescuing the victim and hooking him up, and they brought the hoist back in. The best way I could describe it was it was officially deemed a rollout, but for climbers, the best way I could describe it was that the giant hook that was attaching Dave to it, just think of back clipping a sport, you know, quick draw. That's about the best way I can describe it. So as the hoist was pulled out and it rolled, it unhooked Dave, and unfortunately he fell to his death. But fortunately, he was able to get the victim secured onto the hook prior to him following. So the victim was recovered, and then sadly, the team then had to do a recovery of Dave's body after that. So that one was tragic. You know, about 12, almost 13 years ago now. So, you know, like I had stated earlier, Dave was a mentor to me
Yeah, I was gonna
early
say
on
you
in
had
my
mentioned his
career.
name. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and man, he's missed by so many. You know, he was really passionate about being a SWAT medic. You know, I came from the SWAT team prior to search and rescue, and those guys still all wear his patch you know, and you know, to memorialize him, just to, you know, so he's never forgotten. Yeah, he was a phenomenal human being, but it just kind of goes to show that we love what we do. And Dave, I know Dave wouldn't have done anything different. You know what I mean? He was in it to help people, and that's what we're all in it for. And we know it's dangerous, and you know, we always have Dave and Russell like in the back of our minds, knowing that like this job is inherently dangerous, but you know what? It's worth it because people need help. And because of Dave's accident, though, like a lot of really positive changes across the, not just with Metro, I'm talking across like the entire like search and rescue world. You know what I mean? A lot of changes and stuff were made. Like we use completely different systems now that have no chance of that occurring. You know, things have just been, it's like anything, things have just been modernized and improved, and you know, it's nobody's fault. It's almost like the climb we were talking about the other day. There's just one in a million chances of things happening, and that means sometimes it can happen. And unfortunately for Dave that night, that was one of those things. So yeah,
Yeah, and I mean it's like you said, there's a reason why you do it, and it's the same thing for climbing. You know, chaos is waiting there for all of us, but we still choose to put ourselves in these situations where it could strike. But I think we all grapple with our own mortality in a way, and I think we, whether we like to or not, we kind of do accept that chance of randomness for the passion that we love to do.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh.
So some of these are like questions I've got from guests that were interested in your interview, and also some of these are a bit more philosophical, having had the context of everything we've talked about so far. So the impact of the rescues that you've been on over this long period of time, like, has it changed your definition of what acceptable risk is as a climber in your recreational life? Or has there been any other changes to how you view the sport of climbing or the view of the mountains with all of this like intensity and experience that you've experienced with people?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it has it seeing the things that like we see brings up a lot of like scenarios you would never even think of sometimes. You know what I mean? And it can be very eye-opening. You're like, whoa, that could have happened to me.
Do you have an example? Like something that just comes to the top of your head when you say that?
I, I hate to say it, but the one the other day, the one on Saturday, you know what I mean? Because I mean, that's a climb I could see myself doing. And like really trying to assess that gear and just figure it out. I'd be remiss if I didn't say I didn't like, you know, put myself in the patient's shoes and been like, holy cow, this could have been me. This is the type of route I like to climb. You know what I mean? Like fun, spicy, like, you know, big, bold trad lines. Like that's what I love. And I remember thinking that when I'm talking to him, and I was like, wow, this dude's really experienced. And what happened with that? I don't know. And he doesn't know. Was it a fluke? You know what I mean? And so I've seen some things like that over the years. And then also I like reading. I love reading accident reports. I hate to say that, but I love that the American Alpine Journal puts out that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of knowledge that can be gained. So just that information too, and then the rescues and stuff like that have definitely made me a lot more cautious of a climber. And I don't want to say slower, in some ways more efficient just because of training and things I've picked up, you know, through that, but definitely more prudent on my, not that I was, you know, lazy with my placements and stuff before, but I think I used to run stuff out more than I probably should. And I think we're all kind of guilty of that, like, oh, I'm in comfy terrain, you know. But then there's times where we're climbing on sandstone. Like just yesterday on the rescue, I blew a foothole and literally got banged up on that rescue trying to get to these people. I mean, I caught myself, but it was another one of those moments where I'm like, man, you know, like we're not climbing on, you know, like bulletproof, like indestructible rock here, or anywhere really. So yeah, it has definitely changed my perspective and made me slow down. Being a dad as well, especially having my son and my daughter as well is into climbing. Having them and then seeing some of this stuff makes me a lot more cautious with them too. I'm sure my son hates it, but I'm very cautious on how much he's allowed to go out and do on his own without, like he's gonna have a full on, self-rescue course before he ever gets to go out and lead a multi-pitch by himself with a friend. And then, my parents didn't make me do that, but my parents didn't also see what I've seen now. You know what I mean? So I think with all of that, yeah, I've just become a lot more aware of how much is out of our control in that world. And we need to do everything that we can as climbers to mitigate that. And that sometimes means slowing down and placing more gear, even though you don't think you need to. I think that's been a big takeaway for me because there's been like several injuries that have occurred on climbs. Not talking about Saturday, but other ones where there was plenty of places to place pro and it was a little bit run out. And that ended up in some life-threatening injuries. You know what I mean? And that could literally happen to any of us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that our movement and our attachment to the rock is our first line of safety, but it also can like be this weird sense of too much safety where like, yeah, sure, you said I'm comfy terrain, but it's like, just like the guy who fell on Saturday, he probably felt rock solid. And then all of a sudden you're falling. It's not like this lead up where it's like, oh my God, I'm going to fall. Now I need to place gear. It's like, oh, now you're in the air. It's like, there was nothing you could do to prepare for that. And so, yeah, it's tough because, yeah, it's a hard thing to balance between choosing pro or just being run out in general. Sometimes it's required.
Yeah. I mean, and then sometimes there is, and that's a risk we have to be willing to take. I'm just a lot more aware of it now. And I will find some micro placements that usually I would skip more so now in my older age and than I would have, years ago. So
I'm also a huge proponent of a promoter of bringing more gear. Like I'd say most of the climbing racks that are suggested on Mountain Project or Red Rock, it's like, it says a double, I'm bringing a triple. If it's a triple, I'm bringing 4. Like
if it says standard rack, a standard rack to me in Red Rock is a double rack now. A double rack to like 3. The 3 is the one that sometimes is my one variable, or I'm like, I've climbed this before, like it's a waste. But other than that, I'm like, I don't care how much this weighs. And gear's gotten so much lighter too that it's like there's no excuse, right? I mean, if you're doing something that's like a project,
that's a different story.
Totally.
I think most people are on-siting these routes. And it's like an on-site rack is different than a flash rack or a red point rack. Like, if I'll go back, I don't even know, like any of these climbs, like I'll come back at that climb with experience and I'll either bring more gear because I was like, man, I didn't have enough, or I'll bring way less because I know what I'm going to get myself into. But that randomness, that variable of like, sure, it says a double rack, but it's like, maybe you're weak on a certain size, like bring extra finger sizes if you think you're going to be cruxed on finger sections.
100%. Yeah. Or if I find something that is at like my limit or I do project, like I said, I'm a huge fan of like the whole pink point process now where I'm, either like going out and top rope soloing it and just rehearsing everything, including gear placement. And then I'm literally taking those pieces of gear, you know what I mean? And like, cause I know, and I've got the whole route dialed. Like that's just me now, like being a much more cautious climber. I'm not pushing it and like climbing at my limit on trad gear anymore. It's just, yeah. And maybe that is that, like kind of going back to that last question, as far as like the search and rescue, like view of things, is it worth it anymore? You know what I mean? So, I mean, you can still go out and have a ton of fun, and I'm just, yeah. So,
from all that you've seen, like what kind of percentage would you say of rescues are preventable by doing something before the accident happened versus like chaos like Saturday?
So on the climbing side of things, yeah, I would, I'm going to throw out some arbitrary like numbers.
Yeah.
Here.
No one's going to hold you to these statistics.
I would say at least half of the rescues that we have done in the last year, I think could have been prevented. And where I'm going with that is information. It's people not researching these routes enough and knowing what they're getting themselves into. I think that gets people more than anything. And whether that's because like they didn't prepare themselves enough on like, how to rappel in this environment, or just simply not understanding the route well enough, and not being prepared for it to take them all day and then having to do a rappel at night and they didn't bring a headlamp. And now they're just having an epic. I mean, these are all things that are totally avoidable. And these are all things that we've seen quite a bit. The other big one is weather. And I know this is a hot topic, so we're not going to get on this whole like don't
The
climb
wet
when it
rocks
rains thing.
police, yeah.
Yeah, that's not what this is about. But if you know a storm is coming, because that's common, people will see that the storm is coming and they're like, oh, we got to go get it in now. Let's go climb now. But they don't come prepared for the storm. Like, that's silly. If you're going to be the guy, and I can't really blame you if you know like it's going to start raining and you want to get that one last climb in and it's not supposed to rain until, tonight, cool. But be prepared to still be on the rock tonight if something bad happened and it started raining, because now you're hypothermic because it dropped 40 degrees in the valley and you're wet now and you didn't bring enough layers or food or a headlamp. These are all things that have totally could be preventable. So you could turn like a good, comfortable 70-degree day into a deadly 40-degree night with wind chill and rain. And now you're literally hypothermic and you just became a level 1 because you didn't bring, a rain jacket or a Houdini or a puffy or something, and a headlamp, and it, planned for it.
Other than a headlamp and like a situation like that with like preparing for a storm, what are like some key items? Like, so we talked about like being prepared mentally, knowledge, like being prepared for the situation you're going to be in mentally. What about like things on your harness, things in your backpack? Like what should people be bringing that maybe people are forgetting or just being negligent and not bringing in the first place?
100%. I'm a huge fan. You'll always see me climbing if I'm on like a trad route. I'm either wearing a bullet pack or a small pack, or if it's a 2-rope type climb, oftentimes what I'll do is bring like a tiny little haul bag. Like I have this little Petzl rope bag and I like a tag line, and I'll just literally run that up the climbs with us and stuff like that. You know what I mean? That way I'm accomplishing 2 tasks. But either way, the things that are in that is always water, right? Like I'm one of those people that needs more water than most. I don't know. I just never seem to get enough hydration, but like that's something you need to know about yourself. So bring enough water for you and make sure your partner has enough water for them, right? Like oftentimes we'll see people trying to share an Nalgene and they thought they could get up this climb and
not enough communication between the partnership.
Sure. Right. So obviously water and some snacks, those are always in my pack, and those should always be in everybody's pack, or even like, pockets, however you want to carry it. But that stuff should be clipped to your harness in your pack, something like that. Chapstick is like one of my one things, and I'm telling you, it's a game changer. It always is with me, because when you're out in the sun and you've been up there longer than you thought, and like, man, that's just some morale that can be had out of just applying some chapstick. And that's kind of joking, but kind of serious too, because it's like those little things that keep you comfort, keep your head in the game, you know what I mean? Keep you comfortable. Like that keeps you from like getting stressed out and agitated and making mistakes. Obviously layers. I don't care if it's, a 90-degree day and you're climbing in the shade. I still have a Houdini clip to me because it weighs nothing, or it's in my pack. Like it just never leaves. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of people underestimate the sun too. Like if you're climbing in the sun, don't be in a t-shirt. Like put on a sun hoodie. You got to cover up.
Literally the next thing that I was going to say is, doesn't matter if it's spring, winter, summer, fall, all year round. My base layer is always a sun shirt. Always. Like, is even in the summertime out here, even if I'm skiing in like the backcountry or something like that, I always have a sun shirt on just to keep the sun off of me, because that will destroy you quicker than anything. And it's just such a versatile layer. It's, the hood adds warmth, that, provides shade. Like it's just a magical layer. Like if you have a sun shirt and a Houdini, like you can do pretty well with those two things. Or like a light, I keep saying Houdini is just like, most climbers know what that is, but like a light windbreaker that's packable does so much. A little bit of weather resistance, good wind resistance, it retains heat, things like that, right? When it starts getting colder, have a puffy. There's puffies that fold up to the size of like a softball now. Like invest in good gear. But yeah, water, food, snacks, and then again, headlamp. Like even if you're getting like a dawn start and you're there as the sun's coming up, man, it's Murphy's Law. The day you don't bring the headlamp, that's going to be the day that you get stuck, you know, rope stuck, or you're helping some other injured party or whatever, and you end up being on that wall. And the sun sets here early, man, even in the summer. You know what I mean? Like it gets darker in those canyons earlier than people think. So it's better to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. You know, like my dad used to say. So a headlamp is always in there, food and water and some layers. I mean, that's, you know, and chapstick.
Knife?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I keep a tiny little knife like in my chalk bag. I know there's ones that you can clip on your harness and stuff like that too. I always carry a little first aid kit as well.
Yeah. What's in your first aid kit?
Yep. So a big thing that I keep in there, it sounds silly, but it's almost like a little trauma kit. It's going to be stuff that can save your life when you need it, right? It's not like Band-Aids and stuff like that. It's literally like a tourniquet, because they're so valuable. And I can talk about a story on Brownstone Wall where people had to do a makeshift tourniquet, climbers, because they didn't have one. But I always have a little tourniquet in there. Well, not a little one. Tourniquets just don't take up that much room, and they're light. I have a tourniquet. I have one splint, because you can do a lot with a splint. And I have some ace bandages, and then I have gauze that's very compressed and small that I can use for like any sort of like bleeding or wound wrapping and stuff like that. It's very light. It's very minimal. They usually have a little bit of ibuprofen and Tylenol in there. That's just like my personal, you know, one that's in my pack. Obviously my med kit for SAR is way more involved than that, but you know, just a little one that no matter what outdoor sport I'm doing, that's always with me in like a fanny pack or a backpack of some sort. You know what I mean? It's good to have obviously some sort of communication too. So a big thing that we kind of talk about, and it's a lot for the hiking community, but we have this big thing called Top 5 to Stay Alive. And it's, you know, we have billboards out there. You can Google it. There's, you know, not billboards, I'm sorry, flyers. You'll see it at trailheads and stuff like that, and at some of the climbing gyms. But the big thing is it's, you know, preparedness for going out there. So it's not necessarily, it falls in line with what you're talking about, but the big thing is to tell someone where you're going. Like that's number one. Tell someone the whole itinerary thing that we've kind of beat up a little bit here. That's number one, is like, make sure somebody knows what you're doing and where you're going when you're coming back. Right. The next one would be is like research the weather, like be aware of the conditions, both hot, cold, wind, rain, all that kind of stuff for where you're going.
Yeah,
right?
don't be surprised.
Absolutely. And then have some sort of aid with you, like a first aid kit, like some water, snacks, things like that. Have something for inclement weather, even if you don't expect it to be. That's why I keep going into that Houdini thing. Like these are all these top 5 that we're talking about, right? And then the last one is have like electronics. So have your phone. Know if there's going to be cell service in there. Talk to people. If you don't think there's going to be, even if you're just going to be in Red Rock on a climbing route, bring one of those little beacons with you. Have a way of contacting people if, you know, things hit the fan, like if it gets bad. So like those are our top 5 to like stay alive. If you do all of those things, you know, it basically sets you up for success.
Is there an acronym?
Yeah, so I use TRAIL. Trail, yeah. So the T is tell someone, the R is research, like weather, the climbing route, things like that. The A would be aid for like first aid, food, water, things like that. The I is inclement weather, like meaning be prepared for inclement weather as far as layers. And then the L is kind of contrived, but like electronics, you know what I mean? But yeah, like that's my, you know, but the L actually stands for, I think if you look up the TRAIL acronym, we didn't invent it. I think it stands for locator, like, you know, electronics, but in my brain, it's electronics, you know what I mean? So
I like that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Wrapping up here. On a human perspective, you see people at their worst moments sometimes, both like a belayer of someone who's injured or the partner of someone who's injured. Like, what have you learned about human behavior under stress? Like, do most people rise to the occasion, or is there like a section of people that collapse under the pressure? And what have you noticed about the 2 types of people? And like, how do you characterize the 2 people that respond in those different ways?
Yeah. I wish I could say that everybody rose to the occasion, right? But that is not the case. I feel like in the climbing community, especially with more experienced climbers, you know, oftentimes you'll see those people rise to the occasion just because of what we're doing. There's so much like mental training going on, and you're constantly managing stress when you're climbing at like a higher level, right? Or even just an adventurous climbing level. Oftentimes with our more inexperienced and younger people, the stress management isn't nearly as good. So we see the whole spectrum of stress management, and that's, I think, the best way to summarize like my observations on like human behavior would be that it's just totally dependent on the person. Everybody's going to react differently. Stress inoculation is totally a thing, right? Like the more you're exposed to stressful situations, not necessarily specific ones, but just anything is going to make you better at handling those situations. So people that are constantly subjected to that kind of stress are going to do well. So there's no saying like how people are going to react, until you get to them and see. But yeah, I've seen both ends of the spectrum. Like I said, Saturday, life-threatening injuries, and was totally handling it like a boss, just cool, calm, and collected, not panicking. I've had people that were cold and wet and were freaked out to the point where their behavior was like detrimental to their safety, and they were starting to make mistakes as we're rescuing them. They're like reaching up, trying to unclip lanyards that aren't even theirs. Like it can get pretty wild.
How do you manage that?
Lots of hand slapping. It's like, yeah, it's like dealing with children sometimes.
Wow.
And I don't mean to disrespect any people, but like I've literally had someone reach up and almost unclip my lanyard because they were so stressed, right? And like we're using 2 points and stuff like that in these situations, but still, you know what I mean? You've got somebody that's like
Got grabby hands.
yeah, they've epicked. They're having the worst day of their life at that moment, and it's cold, it's raining, it's windy, and we're stuck 400 feet off the ground, hanging off some, little bolts in the wall, and there's a lot of stuff connected, and they're like, trying to just do what they think is the right thing. But, I guess my biggest piece of advice is once we get there, let us just handle everything.
Trust.
Yeah. Let us handle everything because we'll get people just start reaching and grabbing. And like I said, it's like, hey, stop, don't do that. you know? But yeah, we get very, very interesting experiences with stress, to be sure. Yeah. It's like people like deal with it. I don't think I've had any 2 rescues that were the same as far as a stress level is concerned.
Yeah, it's probably super subjective and personal.
Totally. Yeah.
What about old hardware? Does old hardware ever cause accidents in Red Rock?
Now, are we talking about like fixed gear, like bolts and stuff like that? That's an interesting question. And I wish there was more research out there about it. I don't know if there is. I think probably one of the only places, I mean, you could probably do some Googling and stuff, and maybe the, accidents in North America might have some stuff on there, and they might be a good resource for that. I don't know personally of any rescues that we have done or any accidents that I have heard of that have been because of failed like anchors or gear out in Red Rock. I do know we have a very good climbers coalition here that has a really good like rebolting policy, and they're constantly on it. And I know people are really good about posting on Mountain Project like, hey, I tried to tighten this bolt, this one's loose. And you'll see the Southern Nevada Climber Coalition go on there and talk about like, hey, cool, thanks for the update. We went out there today and we were able to replace this bolt, this, that, and the other. So I know that's happening. But I can't speak to that. I don't know of any instances where there's been an accident, injury, or rescue because of any failed fixed gear or old hardware. Yeah, nothing comes to mind on that.
And you're not aware of any sort of agency keeping track of like that kind of data?
Not that I know of. No, I think a good resource would be the Southern Nevada Climbers Coalition. Those guys have some really smart individuals there that are really plugged in with like the climbing community nationwide, not just here locally. I think that American Alpine Journal has probably been kind of like the depository for a lot of the accident information over the years. I mean, that's literally the place. They'd probably be a good place to reach out to. But me personally, I don't know. I know we keep obviously records of all of our rescues. but that's not going to have that information. Yeah.
And if it, like, I think, especially like you said, I think out here, if you do come across like sketchy hardware, rusty bolts, big spinners, or questionable gear, take a picture of it and drop it at the SNCC, or put, even at the very least, put it on the Vegas Climbers Facebook group, so there's someone who has the connection can actually like forward that.
Or the Mountain Project, like page for that route, right? You know, because that gets monitored, and then like you said, send it to like as many people as you can. It's pretty rare to find that stuff now, I think.
You'd
out
have to
there.
go, like, I've come across a couple.
It's got to be like more obscure type routes for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, like the alcohol wall has got some shady hardware that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, that's still out there for sure, especially when you start getting into the harder stuff, you know, but that's not seeing as much traffic. But yeah, I mean, the best thing you can do is just inform somebody. And there's so many ways to do that now. It's easy. Like I think most of the people on Vegas Climbers are not from Vegas. You know what I mean? Like that's a very, very popular Facebook group that has so much information and knowledge on it. So that's a perfect place to post that kind of stuff, you know. Yeah, do your part as a climber. Don't just, you know, complain about it, you know, like, cause then I love to see the comments about that when people are like, man, there's so many loose bolts on this. And then somebody else is like, well, why don't you learn how to rebolt them or whatever, you know, like that's not what this is, but there's people out there that do want to fix these things. So just inform them.
Yeah. I mean, that's the first, at the very least, let people know it's there, because you were there. You were the one, like, take a picture of it.
Definitely. Yeah. And I know people are always like, oh, bring a little wrench to tighten them and stuff. Like, I'm cautious to tell people to do that, because if you don't know what you're doing, like, just tell someone. Don't go messing with hardware. Like, we don't want everybody out there carrying wrenches and turning bolts, right? Like, so yeah, just do your part. There's enough people out there that care and that actually get support to go out there and replace these bolts. So, yep.
Nice. Well, you know, after everything you've seen, like the mistakes that people have made, like the chaos, like the deaths, like, what about the mountains do you still have a passion for? What about SAR do you have a passion for? And like, what continues to keep driving you to be in these environments and doing what you do?
Man, that's a lot of good questions all rolled in there. I'll start with the mountains. It's funny that you say that. I mean, climbing has literally been a majority of my life. You know, I'm in my 40s now. I've been climbing for over 30 of those. And it's always just been like, you know, just a major passion for me, because like, think about what you get to do and see, you know. I think one of my most memorable moments, specifically here in Red Rock, is like topping out on, there's a climb in Tijuana. It's probably my favorite one out there. Not because just the climb itself is so amazing, but you end up on this little perch, like up towards the Arete on Wilson. And the view that you get from that spot, in my opinion, is like unrivaled. And it's usually like towards the end of the day, right? So you're getting like just this like magic light and stuff. And like you look around and you're like, holy cow, not only did I just do this thing, like this amazing thing to get here, but then look where I am. And how many people have stood in that spot? I mean, a lot now, right? But not, I mean, like maybe like 1% of the world, if that, like some super, like 0.1% probably, right? So to me, it's exploring. It goes back to just that fundamental human nature of just exploring and getting away from like the chaos of everyday life of, you know, civilization. Not that I, you know, don't love people, you know, because that'll be the next part of your question. But for me, it's like, that's my church. That's my, like, where I get to go and just be myself and explore with people that I love, whether that's friends or, you know, my kids, my wife, whomever. Like, I get to go out there and just be in these amazing places and do really hard things that are super rewarding, with just amazing views and clean air and no sounds and just adventure, you know? So that's, I mean, that's, to me, that's what climbing is all about. And that's why I go to the mountains. And you know, and all over this world, there's just so many places, you know, sleeping on a wall in Yosemite. Like, come on. How amazing is that to wake up and have coffee on like a portaledge 2,000 feet off the ground, or in Zion or something like that? Like, that's climbing, you know what I mean? And I think that's the other thing that's so alluring about climbing, is there's so many different ways to do it. You know what I mean? Whether you're, climbing mountains, you're ice climbing, you're rock climbing, you're sport climbing, like bouldering, like we said, climbing is such a broad term that you can just really get into it, and they're all fun, right? Then you were asking why do I love SAR?
Yeah, so I mean, I could see like it being traumatic, and it could like
Yeah.
potentially negatively impact like the way you view the world or the way you view climbing. It might muddy the passion you have for the mountains. Like, what about SAR is still, lights that fire and is something you choose to do every day?
Yeah. Man, I mean, that's a tough question, right? Because I think it's always been in my nature. I mean, literally, I joined the military when I was 17. Like, just I graduated high school early, went right in the military because I wanted to like be a part of something bigger. Where like had these ideas that like I'm gonna help our country. I'm gonna help like people. Like it was just I think ingrained in me as a child, like from my dad. My dad was a police officer up in Montana, and it was just like he was a good man, you know what I mean? He was always like just trying to help other people. And he instilled that in me. And like ever since I was a young kid, that's all I ever wanted to do. And now I'm still a kid inside, but I'm, a grown adult. And it's like I still just want to help people. And now I get to do that in my favorite place in the world, which is the mountains, right? Like I get to help people that really need it. Like they're having the worst day of their life in a lot of cases, and I get to help them. I mean, if that's not, motivating, like what else is? You know what I mean? Like like getting to help people, I think is I don't know. I know I keep repeating that, but it's a hard thing to explain until you've gotten to do it. Like they don't even need to say thank you. You can just tell when you've got somebody that's like literally that bad off, and you have the knowledge and the skills to be able to access them and do this thing where you can get them to safety. Like it's a pretty remarkable experience, and it's very rewarding. And you know what I mean? Like you work really hard to do these things, and it almost becomes, I hate to use the word addicting, but it keeps you coming back because you realize it's something that like not everybody can do, and people need help, and you can do it, so go do it and keep doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. I love
Yeah.
that. We need more people like you.
But I don't think it'll ever, you were asking if it might jade me at all or make you jaded, I guess would be a better way to say that, but I don't think it'll ever do that to me because it's like the mountains, they're just such a special place, and for everybody that you know shares that feeling, they don't need me to explain that. So I don't think you can ruin that. I don't think you can, even with carnage and injury and stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome. Where can people follow your story? Where can people follow what you're doing?
So I think definitely for our search and rescue team, one of our guys that's his thing. He loves the social media, and he's
doing a great job
good
at
at it, right? So we can be reached on Instagram at LVMPD SAR SAR. So that one's pretty popular. And then our Facebook is called Friends of Las Vegas Metro Search and Rescue. It's kind of a long name. But normally, if you just go to the LVMPD SAR, there it will link to the Facebook as well. But those are both good places. Our officer that runs that, he checks the DMs on it frequently. We get a lot of people that reach out on there and have questions, anything from like how to become a volunteer or what they can do to support. We operate a lot on like donations and stuff like that. So it kind of does lead you to that, to help support our volunteers with equipment and stuff like that too.
Is there a webpage that people can donate to?
Yeah, so we have a website, lvmpdsar.org, and that's a good resource. It talks about like our Friends of Metro Foundation and different ways that they can kind of support the team in there. Yeah, so there's some good information on there. We also have a big 5K coming up actually out in Red Rock. We do it we're starting to do it every year. I believe last year was the first year for it. It was a very successful turnout. This year, we've already got a ton of donors and sponsors on board. It's going to be a big event. It was kind of Spring Mountain Ranch area out there. Really fun event. We usually do like a big helicopter show out there and kind of demo some like rescue stuff. Like our canine officers will be out there. It's like a big, fun family experience. And then obviously it goes to a good cause. So look that up. It's on a lot of information online about it. I want to say it's April 18th or 19th, the latter part of April. But yeah, a lot of good info on there. But yeah, so you can reach us on all that kind of stuff, and Yeah.
Awesome. I appreciate you coming down and chatting. It's really, really great to meet you, and appreciate everything you do and what you do for the SAR and the team in general. And yeah, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, Kyle, thank you so much. And thanks for doing this, like getting all this information out there. Have a great podcast. I appreciate it.